What's poppin', my Guardians? It is me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show, y'all. This is about to be the ultimate breakdown for all three Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I am so freaking blessed to have been able to cover James Gunn's masterpiece of a trilogy for Heavy Spoilers, so this is all three of those breakdowns together in one video for your viewing pleasure. So grab some popcorn, grab your wife, grab your daughter, grab your son, maybe even your next door neighbor, because we're about to get into it. This is going to be a breakdown of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, my personal favorite Marvel Studios movie of all time, because it literally changed my life. So let's just jump into this beast of an MCU banger, shall we? Guardians of the Galaxy first starts with a scene from the year 1988, and fittingly so, because this scene of Meredith Quill's death is at the core of the trauma that will motivate all of Star-Lord's actions throughout the Guardians trilogy. Meredith Quill is of course played by actress Laura Haddock, who had previously made a cameo in Captain America: The First Avenger as one of Captain America's fans looking for an autograph. Due to this recasting, fans have speculated that Star-Lord could be a descendant of Captain America and this woman through a potential one-night stand, but James Gunn has gone on record to say that this is not the case. Laura Haddock just has two roles because she's just that talented. But as a young 8-year-old Peter Quill waits outside of his mother's hospital room, you can see a flag for the state of Missouri on a hospital desk next to him, establishing that Peter Quill grew up in Missouri, much like director James Gunn did. Peter tries his best to ignore the incredibly harsh reality of his mother's failing life by listening to the never-ending heartbeat of his mother through her Awesome Mix Volume 1 cassette tape instead, with the song I'm Not in Love by 10cc playing in Peter's ears as his grandpa Jason Quill goes to bring Peter in to say goodbye to his mom. Peter's grandfather Jason is actually named after Jason of Spartax, a ruler of the planet Spartax who is the actual father of Peter Quill in the Marvel Comics. But James Gunn would of course go a completely different route with Peter's father in the MCU, as we would learn in Guardians 2 that Peter's father was none other than the rogue Dark Celestial Ego the Living Planet. Meredith would give Peter her father's name as his middle name, as he was born Peter Jason Quill. We can see Peter wearing a river rafter shirt, apparently from a fictional JD canoe rental service, which is located along the Dolores River that runs along Colorado and Utah. But while most people just think that this is just some random shirt that Peter is wearing, I believe that Peter's whole outfit here actually has two layers of significance, both pointing to the future. When you look at his actual shirt, you can see that the two main things that stand out here are the big ol' sun in the center, along with the bald eagle flying to the right of that sun. This sun and eagle was put here to subtly point to Peter Quill being the Star-Lord, as the Earth's sun is a star and the bald eagle is known as the Lord of the Sky. So I thought that was some really clever symbolism there. However, when you look at Peter's outfit as a whole, you can see that it was very clearly modeled after the original uniforms that Star-Lord's Guardians of the Galaxy wore in the Marvel Comics, as Peter's plaid shirt is red and blue like the Guardians uniforms are, with that big ol' sun at the center of his chest, alluding to the golden flame at the center of the Guardians' chests. James Gunn, of course, would not be able to use these comic-accurate uniforms until Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is a bummer, but it is still cool to see those outfits get a super early shout out like this pretty much right off the bat. As Peter approaches his mother's bed, you can see a Peanuts themed Get Well Soon card with a Snoopy on it. And when Meredith Quill asks Peter how he received his newest black eye, he tells her that he got punched in the face after avenging a frog that was hurt by one of the neighborhood bullies. I love this particular moment here because it establishes right off the bat one of Peter's biggest flaws. His emotions cause him to act irrationally, without any consideration of the consequences. And we would see that particular quality expressed the best when Peter Quill would almost completely screw the entire universe over when he punched Thanos in the face as a response to the splattered death of Gamora in Avengers Infinity War. Meredith then tells Peter that he reminds her of his father, who she then describes as an angel composed of pure light. And even though Meredith Quill's family thought that her brain cancer was causing her to keep blabbing about some magic angelic baby daddy that none of them had actually ever met, we would learn later in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 that Meredith was actually speaking quite literally, as her light angel was actually the blue light glowing dark celestial Ego the Living Planet. Meredith calling Peter's father an angel made out of pure light is also incredibly important here, as it appears to be directly linked to director James Gunn's big missing Guardians of the Galaxy Easter egg that he has hidden in this movie. And trust me, I would know, as James Gunn has gone on record to say that I am the only person in the world who has gotten the closest to finding said Easter egg, which is literally my life's biggest achievement.
Where's MT?
I'm right here, bro.
There he is.
What's going on, dude?
This man is on a quest for the final Easter egg in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Damn right, man.
It's a terrible quest. He goes down the strangest pathways looking for the last hidden Easter egg in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, which is still out there, swear to God. And he's come very close to finding it, but hasn't found it yet. So this is the first time I've met IMT.
Dude, it's good to see you, man.
As that Easter egg hunt has been a main focus of my obsession for nearly a decade now. Jesus Christ, time flies. But more on that Easter egg a little bit later. With Meredith feeling her life slipping away from her body, she begs her son to take her hand so that she can connect with her son for the last time. However, because Peter refuses to accept the devastating reality unfolding before him, he rejects his mother's hand right before she flatlines, causing Peter to scream at her body in denial and anger. Like we saw earlier with the frog, Peter Quill is an extremely empathetic and feeling person, and so because of this, we would see Peter have this very same reaction in adulthood when witnessing both Yondu's death in Guardians 2 and Rocket Raccoon's brush with death in Guardians 3. It would not be revealed until Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 that the real reason why Meredith Quill died in 1988 at the beginning of this movie was because her demon of an angelic ex-boyfriend used his cosmic celestial powers to implant a tumor within her brain.
I know that sounds bad.
And one of the biggest reasons why Ego would do this is because Ego knew that he cared for Meredith Quill so much that he would have stopped his entire life's mission just to be with her. And God forbid he ever did something like that, right? I mean, why be selfless for 2 seconds? However, I believe that Ego's tumor within Meredith's brain might have also served a second purpose, because as soon as Meredith Quill dies in this movie, Peter runs outside in emotional distress. But guess who is right outside waiting for Peter? Mr. Yondu Udonta and his faction of Ravagers, a group of space pirates that were hired by Ego himself to pick up and deliver as many of Ego's children as possible. And because of this child trafficking, Yondu is pretty much kicked out of the Ravagers by Stakar. But isn't that the funniest coincidence for Yondu to show up at the exact moment of Meredith's death? I don't think so. It seems to me that the implication here is that because Ego placed a tumorous extension of himself inside of Meredith's brain, he knew the exact moment that Meredith would die because he was tied to Meredith's life force. And because of that, he would send Yondu to collect Peter the exact moment that she died so that Ego wouldn't have to bear the sight of Meredith Quill's dead body, because at the end of the day, humans are just fragile temporary creatures. But anyway, after we see Yondu kidnap a young Peter Quill, time moves forward a couple of decades to the year 2014, where an adult Peter Quill can be seen dancing on the abandoned planet of Morag on his way to collect the greatest treasure the planet has to offer, the Infinity Stone of Power. Morag is actually the name of the first ever leader of the Kree in Marvel Comics, and its inclusion in this movie seems to hint towards Morag itself being a former Kree planet from the distant past. The planet was almost actually named Mazar during the storyboarding phase of the script, which is also a fitting name for this planet as Mazar means shrine, grave, or tomb in Arabic. And this devastated planet is very much all of those things, because according to James Gunn himself, Morag was once a very populated planet that became one big ocean planet as a result of some kind of global warming catastrophe. Peter Quill was only able to walk on the surface of this planet and access the temple within because Morag's waters recede only for a short period of time, once every 300 years. So if anybody was going to make a play for the orb, they would have to be quick about it, or wait 300 more years, unless they were like Namor or something. But the likelihood of that is like 4 out of 10 at best. I don't know what I'm saying. I failed statistics. But anyways, we can see traces of the former people of Morag when Peter Quill whips out his handy-dandy holomap projector, which was given to him by the broker, the very dude who hired Yondu for the job in the first place, but then, Peter stole that job from Yondu because kids are supposed to be pains in the asses to their parents. Like I said before, because Morag is named after the Kree's first leader, it's highly likely that everybody in this footage is supposed to be a blue Kree. However, because the holo map projector itself covers everything in a blue light, we're not able to tell. One of these dead little girls that used to live on Morag can be seen playing with the cutest dog in the world. A dog who was actually director James Gunn's dog, Wesley Von Spears, who sadly passed away around February of 2020. R.I.P. you absolute fluffy king, I wish I got to meet you and kiss you on the face! As Peter approaches the temple, he deactivates his Star-Lord mask and activates his Walkman to play Come and Get Your Love by Redbone. And a quick note about Star-Lord's mask throughout this movie, because while it's obviously a variant of the original Star-Lord mask from Star-Lord's original Guardians of the Galaxy comics, to me, the inclusion of this mask throughout the Guardians trilogy was always meant to represent Peter's celestial heritage, as when Peter wears that mask, it kind of makes his entire head look like the head of one of Arishem's Celestials, especially the eyeballs. And I also noticed that throughout this trilogy, Peter pretty much only wears this mask until he rejects his father and his celestial blood in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I mean, yeah, he does use it in Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, and yes, I do know that his mask was just chilling at home in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I'm just saying that from a symbolic standpoint, for James Gunn's Guardians trilogy, the mask itself seems to represent Peter's celestial nature and his desire to learn more about his father. But when he rejects his father's celestial nature, he doesn't feel the need to wear the mask as much anymore, because he just chooses to be his human self instead. Like, it's literally just a symbolic thing for this trilogy, if that makes sense. But anyways, as Peter dances his way to the temple room, he picks up an Orloni, one of the most common alien species throughout the cosmos, with traces of these rodents being found on pretty much every planet in the galaxy. The movie shows an Orloni being eaten by a hairless Fasaki at a bar on Nowhere later on, and we would even see Baby Groot fighting with one of these Orloni at the beginning of Guardians 2. And speaking of that hairless Fasaki that eats that Orloni in Nowhere, we would see what a furry Fasaki looks like in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 when Adam Warlock adopts one of them as a pet named Blurp. But anyways, due to this Orloni race of rodent-looking aliens being so prominent throughout the cosmos, I highly suspect here that it'll be revealed later on that all of these Orloni are actually deviants. You know, like the ones that the Eternals fight in their movie. Just a deviant that is super early in their evolutionary journey that can't really do anything other than prey on beings their size and smaller, just like they do with Baby Groot in Guardians 2. And that's how you know the Eternals of various other planets are doing their job, because they're not allowing the deviants to evolve past rodents. But of course, that's just a theory. This video is going to be a mixture of breakdown and theory, just so you guys know. But anyways, we then also see Peter dancing with the skeleton of a mysterious alien being, an alien whose head bears a striking resemblance to the Phalanx, in particular the one found within the pages of Annihilation Conquest Wraith number 2. The Phalanx did have a major presence on the Kree planet Morag 4, aka Terma, in Annihilation Conquest number 1, so the possibility of James Gunn sneakily leaving a Phalanx Easter egg here is pretty high, even though Marvel Studios technically did not own the rights to the Phalanx at that time. A super secret hidden Phalanx Easter egg would be extra fitting, considering that Star-Lord's iteration of the Guardians of the Galaxy team made their debut in a Phalanx-centric comic book event in Annihilation Conquest number 6. But it is when Peter enters the temple itself where we get the motherload, ladies and gentlemen. This sealed up Infinity Stone shrine in this Morag temple is, in my opinion, probably the biggest Easter egg in MCU history, as these panels that line the walls of this shrine room seem to tell a massively important story to the overall MCU, the entire life cycle of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the very origin story of the Infinity Stones themselves. Because the Collector was to introduce the concept of the Infinity Stones for the very first time in this movie, James Gunn and Marvel Studios needed to definitively iron out an origin story for exactly how the MCU 616 universe came to be, as the Infinity Stones themselves are a byproduct of the Big Bang. I believe that these Morag panels within this shrine tell that story, mostly because the people that used to live on Morag existed a very long ass time ago, And I believe that it was so long ago that these ancient Kree could have actually been around during a time even before the Big Bang filled the universe with light, with the dark Exelon monk Kree that served Ronan the Accuser likely being remnants of those Kree that used to love living in darkness just as much as Malekith and the Dark Elves did. Because you gotta remember that the MCU movie preceding this one was 2013's Thor: The Dark World, and that movie introduced the concept of aliens throughout the cosmos who existed within the Marvel Universe even before the Big Bang and the Infinity Stones even showed up, with the Dark Elves being the dominant alien species in this dark era of the universe. So much like the introduction of the light led Malekith's homeworld to ruin, the explosive birth of a star over the primordial planet of Morag could have triggered the global warming catastrophe that caused all the former Dark World Kree to abandon their planet, with the Power Stone itself having landed on their planet during the Big Bang. And while yes, I do realize that this is all theorizing here, but if you really look at this movie and the MCU in general, it seems pretty clear that the Dark Elves weren't the only aliens out there that hated the light. In fact, it kind of seems like all the races Thanos associates himself with all have a problem with light in general. I mean, remember when Thanos invaded Earth with the Chitauri, who covered most of their faces with these weird masks? Or how about those native Sicarians working with Ronan to secure the orb? They kind of wear masks to protect their faces from the light in a similar vein as well, much like Thanos' right-hand man, the Other, did. That dude literally walked around with both of his eyes completely covered, with one eye only being exposed when Ronan snaps his neck later on in the movie. All of those aliens, including the Exelon monks, seem to have a beef with light-obsessed conquerors and cultures. You know, like the Dark Elves had with Asgard, and the Kree, Exelon monks, and Sicarians had with the sun-loving Nova Corps. So because of that beef, it appears that these darkness-loving alien races have all formed an alliance with Thanos the Mad Titan, possibly as a way to fight back against all those light beings that infested their universe thanks to those annoying Celestials that entered the universe along with the Big Bang. And I highly suspect that when we see Essen the Searcher later on during the Collector's presentation, that Essen the Searcher is destroying a planet filled with primordial dark universe beings just so they can terraform that planet and get that planet ready for their own celestial experimentations with life. Like straight up colonization, man. But anyways, the reason why I'm bringing all of this up before getting into these Morag panels is to get you guys to realize that for a race to be able to write the story of the very birth of the cosmos, they probably had to be there to witness it, just like the Dark Elves were. Because if you focus on the design of the center of the panel itself, you will see a giant golden circle housing two smaller circles inside. Along the edge of the outer of these two inner circles are four beings: entropy, infinity, eternity, and death. The four main cosmic entities of the Marvel Universe that keep the entire Marvel cosmos together. This would be the first time that these major deities were mentioned in MCU history, with Infinity, Death, and Eternity later getting statues at the Gates of Eternity in Thor: Love and Thunder. Eternity, however, is the most popular amongst the four of them, as he has been referenced by name a few times after this moment, with Star-Lord saying his name while seeing the entire universe in Guardians 2, Kang mentioning wanting to conquer Eternity in Quantumania, and us just straight up seeing Eternity himself in Thor: Love and Thunder. These four entities can all be seen reaching out towards this innermost circle here, a multi-ring circle with 6 rectangles of color inside, with each of these colors in this multi-ringed inner circle representing each of the Infinity Stones as well as each core aspect of reality. Yellow for mind, green for time, blue for space, orange for soul, purple for power, and red for reality. This is about the extent of what people focus on when they reflect on these Morag panels. 4 cosmic entities reaching out towards the Infinity Stones. But if you actually truly look and study what is going on in this image, you'll see that what you are actually witnessing are these 4 entities reaching out towards the light of the Big Bang itself. This multi-ringed inner circle of Infinity Stone colors is supposed to represent the light of the Big Bang, the source of where everything in the universe came from, including the very natural laws laws governing the universe's existence. This is where the infinity colors come in, because much like it's been said over and over and over again throughout MCU history, the Infinity Stones represent a core aspect of what keeps the entire 616 universe together. And just like Thor tells Jane Foster in the very first Thor movie, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a mixture of real-world science and Marvel Comics fiction. They are literally one in the same, like Thor tells Jane. Wow, that rhymed. That was pretty great. So, this being the case, I believe that this Big Bang circle in the center of this Morag panel to be a little something called the initial singularity. And it's something that Peter Parker brings up briefly in Spider-Man Far From Home.
You're saying there's a multiverse? Because I thought that was just theoretical. I mean, that completely changes how we understand the initial singularity. We're talking about an eternal inflation system.
The initial singularity is that initial bubble of incredibly hot, raw energy condensed into an impossibly small, dense space that formed right before it popped, creating not just one universe, but the entire MCU poly-multiverse itself. But for the sake of this video, we will primarily stick with 616. But if you are wondering what the initial singularity looks like, it basically looks like the explosion that Loki was trying to stop in Loki Season 2. That explosion of yellow light is the initial singularity about to undergo another Big Bang. And I believe you can also see Doctor Strange enter the initial singularity in the first Doctor Strange movie, specifically when the Ancient One sends him on his weird cosmic acid trip to the beginning of time itself. I really want to break down that entire sequence one day because there's a lot in there that is pretty big information. But anyways, before this initial singularity star of energy, there was no time, no space, no reality, no mind, no soul, no power in the entire cosmos. But with that explosion of infinity's energy came all of those things all at once, with the Infinity Stones merely just being tiny, minuscule, accidental byproducts of that explosion. Every single person, god, thing, force of nature in the MCU is made out of this rainbow of Big Bang energy. A rainbow of Big Bang energy that came from the golden goddess Infinity herself, as a result of her becoming one with her boyfriend Eternity. Now, because the Marvel Cinematic Universe was founded with an Iron Man movie, the MCU is heavily based on the science of our reality, with each of those colors of infinity representing one core scientific concept that is at the root of our reality. And y'all better grab a pen and paper because I'm about to lay it all down right now in a concept that I have called the Marvel Trigger Theory. The entire MCU has been color-coded for over a decade now. However, before I get into the science of all of the infinity colors that make up this center circle, let's talk about the story being told in between that center Big Bang circle and that outer circle of cosmic beings, because this whole panel, ladies and gentlemen, is one giant doomsday clock for the MCU universe, depicting how the universe will be born, how it'll die, and how it will be reborn again, with each of these cosmic entities helping push that doomsday clock along. Let's start at the top at midnight, because midnight is when the Big Bang happens, and that Big Bang filled the universe with space, matter, and dark matter. But for millions of years after the Big Bang, the universe was still dark as hell and very, very, very hot. Hotter than a Tostino's pizza roll, if you can believe it. This is where the cosmic entity Entropy, who represents the scientific concept of entropy, rolls in. Entropy walks in and says, "Oh my god, this shit is way too hot. Let me use my cool breath to cool it down." And so Entropy does just that, which we see represented in this Morag panel. And over time, this super hot, dark, early universe chills the hell out. However, the dominating matter during this dark time is dark matter. And so over time, because of this dark matter, around 3 o'clock on this doomsday clock, gravity starts helping this dark matter form into planets. And eventually, somehow, dark matter aliens started living on those planets. Aliens like the Dark Elves, the Chitauri, the native Sakarians, the primordial god Null, and even a prenatal Ego the Living Planet were all just vibing out, enjoying their beautiful universe of complete darkness, and probably, taking some bomb-ass naps. I know Null was. And all those dark universe aliens were having a nice little party, dancing to My Chemical Romance and the Birthday Massacre until around, 4:30-ish, when knock knock, who's there? Oh my god, it's that sexy lady, Infinity, arriving fashionably late to the house party wearing a super sparkly dress. And what's this? She's brought her kids to the party? Who brings their celestial rainbow kids to a house party full of emo dark aliens? And why did these kids bring a bunch of strobe lights, disco balls, and glow sticks? Those kids better not mess up the vibe, Infinity. Better watch out. But because Infinity is an entitled mother, Infinity don't give a damn about all that and lets her celestial kids, who are essentially just sentient living stars with arms and legs, turn this dark emo house party into a super bright, loud, and annoying rave, like those jellyfish did to SpongeBob's house in that one episode. After millions of years of darkness and calm, Infinity came in with her celestials to make stars. And then those celestials made golden gods of light like Odin, Zeus, and the rest of the gods of Omnipotent City, as well as the golden Eternals to protect those stars and all the living experiments that the celestials were conducting on all of those planets they took over. And the Dark Elves, the Ancient Kree, the Sicarians, and Chitauri were pissed off, bro. But nobody was more pissed than Null, who literally chopped off one of those Celestials' heads after they woke him up from his long-ass nap, with that head becoming the Celestial Head of Nowhere. And because of this, Null dedicated the rest of his crazy long life to wiping out the light and everyone who creates or defends that light. And so he makes dark weapons out of that dark matter like the Necrosword and the symbiotes, and then goes on a rampage until that dark Necrosword eventually falls into the hands of Gore the God Butcher. And if Null is the number one most pissed off dark alien, then the number two most pissed off dark universe alien was of course Malekith, who would do what Null did and forge his own weapon made out of that primordial dark matter darkness, calling that item the Ether. With the third most pissed off dark alien likely being the elder god Chthon, who was so pissed that he wrote a whole magic diss album called The Darkhold and left that shit behind so that he can trick anybody that reads it into becoming so hungry for the light that they end up eating all the light in their universe in order to gain enough energy to ascend and become the only dark being in their existence. 838 Strange did this in Multiverse of Madness, and it's a move that likely led to the creation of Dormammu himself, in my opinion, as Dormammu is also voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch. Agatha and Wanda almost did this themselves, but were stopped before their hunger made them destroy everything. Basically, the only dark being that wasn't pissed was Ego, who didn't have the consciousness to be pissed until he started to absorb some of that starlight the Celestials made. That is the exact moment his brain turned on, and he started seeking to absorb all that light mind energy within living beings. Like, Ego did not care about anything that came before the light because his brain did not turn on at that point. But what about the rest of these dark universe aliens like the Kree, the Sicarians, and the Chitauri, huh? How do they fight back against their colonizers and oppressors? Like, they're not strong enough, so they have no choice but to make themselves strong enough. Unless, you know, some of those gods of light fucked up and made a psychopath of a being named Thanos, and that psycho went around telling these dark beings that he was going to eliminate at least half of those pesky light beings colonizing their universe. So dark aliens like Chitauri and Sicarians join up with Thanos to help him get that shit done. The Dark Kree, on the other hand, decide to make themselves into a mighty empire through the use of their primordial dark science, until, you know, that Kree empire got a little bit too cool for all that dark science and decided to depend on the light instead, causing those dark Kree, aka Exelon monks, to abandon the modern Kree in order to stick to their old Kree ways, using their dark science to make Ronan the Accuser into their powerful Dark Warrior. A Dark Warrior who would eventually ally himself and his fellow Exelon monks with Thanos in order to get revenge on the Nova Empire, who, like the gods of Asgard, are looking to use solar light power to colonize the universe in their own way. So this all being said, from about 4:30 to about 9 o'clock is when the Celestials spend all of their time expanding the borders of their universe of light, with everything outside of the borders of the 9 realms that they created now being known as the Shadow Realm, because that realm is where all the unconquered parts of the cosmos lie. However, 2 hours before 9, at around 7 o'clock, is when Eternity comes into the picture and does something absolutely crazy. With all these dark forces running around trying to permanently destroy the light before its time, Eternity needs to boost life's ability to survive. So around 7 o'clock, Eternity uses his big ol' hammer to forge souls with a strong sense of preservation, a never-ending tenacity to survive against all odds and rage against the dying of the light. 7 p.m. is when Eternity forges himself some Avengers, Guardians, mutants, and marvels of all sorts in order to defend all of the reality that lives inside of him, basically giving himself a boost of more white blood cells needed to combat the sickness that is darkness and these dark beings, at least until that doomsday clock hits 9 o'clock, because 9 o'clock is when the cosmic entity Death starts preparing the universe of light to end, ushering the universe into a period known as the black hole era of the cosmos, an era that scientists believe will come as a result of all the stars dying and turning into black holes, until eventually the universe is just one big giant black hole at the very end of time itself, with the entirety of the energies of the universe crunched together as a singular super hot singularity at the center of that last black hole. A singularity that is represented as a crunched up ball of light within Death's hand. This black hole era is meant to last from 9 p.m. to 11:59 p.m. on the Morag doomsday clock, and you can even see tiny black holes represented around that time. And it'll last until that final black hole absorbs so much energy that it passes its own gravity threshold, leading to all that crunched up, balled up energy exploding outwards from that black hole, leading to another Big Bang at midnight. Like, the only living person that exists during this black hole era of the cosmos is He Who Remains, a man who sat in the middle of the biggest black hole there ever was at 11:59 of the doomsday clock, manipulating the energy inside of it and to purposely stop that doomsday clock from hitting midnight when all of those energies explode. And because He Who Remains is the great weaver of everyone's fate, he would act just like a weaver and make a loom to turn all that crunched up energy at the black hole center into threads, giving each of those threads a number and its own unique fate, and forming those threads into a perfect halo called the Sacred Timeline, which is why the design of He Who Remains' windows is literally based off of the 6 infinity energies of the cosmos swirling around a black hole. This is the energy that makes everything that ever was, so he can make as many universes as he wants using this energy. He Who Remains was the only person stopping the entire Marvel multiverse from rebooting completely, until he got bored and let Sylvie stab him. This led to his temporal loom going haywire and Loki and all of his friends having a front row seat to the next MCU Big Bang, where the doomsday clock starts all over again. And that is the story these Morag panels tell with these cosmic entities. Now, because the MCU is heavily based on the science of our real-life reality, each one of the colors of infinity represent one core scientific aspect that is at the root of our universe's existence. And y'all better grab a pen, because I'm about to lay it all down right now in a concept that I've been calling the Marvel Trigger Theory for the past few years now. As a reflection of our universe, the 6 scientific core aspects of the MCU universe are matter, dark energy, dark matter, gravity, negentropy, and deep darkness, or black holes. The yellow Mind Stone energies that pervade the entire MCU cosmos represent baryonic matter, or just matter in general, meaning it's the energy associated with light, atomics, molecules, and everything on a quantum level that humans can see and interact with. The Marvel Universe has an overall term for this quantum mind energy called the Enigma Force, but I will not get into all that right now. But the Enigma Force is tightly linked to both the Microverse and the Gods of Light in the Marvel comics because of this. It's essentially the most important force in the Marvel Universe, in my opinion, but whatever. But anyways, because of this Enigma Force mind energy is the energy associated with stars like the sun, nuclear reactions, yellow electricity, as well as the concept of evolution. Because like the Ancient One said in the first Doctor Strange film, the root of existence is where mind and matter meet. And without atomic level reactions, our minds would not be possible, because our brain is just electricity moving throughout our nervous system. Examples of MCU characters who utilize the yellow power of the atom include Vision, who uses his Mind Stone to phase his body, MCU Electro, who is able to manipulate electrons to both phase his body as well as become living electricity itself, Odin, the Allfather of Light, with his trusty weapon Gungnir, and Zeus with his control over lightning. This is also the energy responsible for astral projection in the MCU, as the word astral means star, and stars are tied to quantum atomic reactions. When a sorcerer pushes a person's astral form out of their body, they lose consciousness, right? That's because they literally lost their consciousness, their mind, the quantum reactions that make them them. And we see Jane Foster lay out this science pretty simply.
That's a quantum field generator, isn't it?
It's a soul forge.
Does the soul forge transfer molecular energy from one place to another?
Yes.
Quantum field generator.
The Eternals also derive their godly cosmic powers from the mind energy that comes from the Earth's yellow sun as well. But since human flesh and blood were not designed by the Celestials to be efficient energy-storing robots like the Eternals, humans have to absorb their yellow solar mind radiation over the course of thousands of years, evolving painfully slow over time, until one day they eventually evolve into mutants. But Waiting sucks, right? If only there was a way to amplify the evolutionary power of all that yellow mind energy. Well, that's where the next color comes in. Blue. Let's talk about the blue space energies of the MCU. The blue space stone energies of the MCU cosmos represent dark energy. And out of all of the colors, this shit has been the most influential in the MCU so far. And this is mostly because in science, dark energy consists of 68.3% of all the content in the universe. Almost 70% of our reality is this invisible energy shit that we cannot see, with the baryonic matter stuff that we can see making up a measly 4.9% of everything. Compared to 70%, that's nothing. Like, I'm not even joking, man. Dark energy is everywhere. Dark energy is literally inside of you right now, and you don't even know it. Like, the shit's nuts. It's literally the majority of space, which is why it's associated with the space stone. Scientists have theorized that right after the Big Bang, space was created as a result of this invisible dark energy's obsession with expansion. Dark energy is responsible for our universe getting bigger and bigger and bigger by the second, expanding our universe's potential. And not only is dark energy that powerful, that shit is insanely fast. And when I say fast, I mean twice over the speed of light fast. And light ain't no slouch. Dark energy is some insanely powerful stuff. If only humanity could harness that dark energy power for itself. If they did, humanity would be able to go higher, further, and faster than ever before. Hint, hint, hint. Hey, maybe one day, some alien lady named Marvel could use dark energy to develop a super fast light speed engine. And maybe some of that dark energy from that engine would fall on a lady named Brie Larson and expand her potential to be more. And since dark energy is everywhere, maybe some smart nerd named Anthony Edward Stark could use this dark energy science to make himself a nearly limitless power source to power all of his super fast machines. Or maybe some psycho named Kang the Conqueror could use it to power his super suit so that he can make portals across space like he has a tesseract. Or imagine what would happen if a big chunk of dark energy irradiated rock fell from the sky and fell on some Africans. Maybe they could use that dark energy to make a futuristic city that lasts for centuries. Or maybe some nerd named Abraham Erskine could turn some of that dark energy into a blue juice of some sort and expand humanity's strength to make super soldiers. With all this blue dark energy around the universe accelerating people's evolution, you're gonna eventually have a big old universe filled with superpowered technology and people. Basically, you have yourself a universe of Marvels, a Marvel cinematic universe.
Wow.
This is why all the powers of Carol, Monica, and Kamala are all associated with blue dark energy, because dark energy is the Marvel trigger of the MCU. It is the energy of expansion, not just of space, but of a person's potential. And it's exactly the type of dark energy that Ego the Living Planet was made out of. And what was Ego's main obsession again? Oh yeah, that's right. Expansion. As a living dark energy star, Ego desired to expand and cover all that exists, just like dark energy does by nature. And speaking of blue stars, when Tony Stark created his new reactor powered by his fancy new dark energy element, he did what Doc Ock said at the end of No Way Home and created the power of a blue sun at the palm of his hand. A blue sun like the people of the Kree capital planet of Kree used to have in the comics. I believe that Kree-Lar's blue sun is referenced in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 as the very symbol of Ronan's faction of Dark Kree who follow the old forgotten ways of the Kree Empire. Because if you look at the symbol, you'll see a triangle behind what looks like a cube-like figure at the center of a circle, a reference to Tony's new element from Iron Man 2, when he used his father Howard Stark's research to unlock the secret of dark energy and create his own dark energy element, represented by a downward-facing triangle, just like we see in the logo of the ancient Kree, which makes me believe that this Kree symbol represents the blue sun that the Kree used to live under a long time ago before they had to migrate to Hala. And this dark energy star symbol of the Kree could also possibly be the dark star that the Dark Aster name references. There's actually a few possibilities for that, but we'll get into that later. But hey, speaking of Howard Stark, if the term dark energy sounds familiar to some of you who have watched Avengers 1 a million times, it's because dark energy was exactly what Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. were studying along with all those nerds at Project Pegasus at the Joint Dark Energy Mission Facility. You know, when Nick Fury and Marvel spent decades studying the secrets of the cosmic energy coming out of the blue tesseract, aka the space stone energies. Because like I said before, since dark energy is everywhere, if you can figure out its secrets, you can have access to infinite energy. And infinite energy is something that America and the world will always fight for, especially evil organizations like Hydra and Roxxon. Like the logo for Roxxon's Roxcart supermarket in Loki Season 1 has a blue cube as its logo in the future, likely to point to Roxxon's eventual profiting off of dark energy. And those two X's inside of that Roxcart logo seem to point towards dark energy's ability to manipulate human DNA, as those two X's are supposed to be a double helix. But anyways, so if regular matter only makes up 4.9% of the cosmos and dark energy makes up 68.3%, what makes up the rest of the remaining percentages? Well, it's more invisible stuff, but this time it's a type of matter called dark matter, and it's represented in the MCU as red reality energy, more commonly known as chaos energy or chaos magic. Like, don't confuse dark matter with dark energy because these are two completely different things. But because both dark matter and dark energy don't interact with light or baryonic matter, there isn't a whole lot humanity knows about dark matter in general. But what they do know about dark matter specifically is that its effect on gravity is responsible for keeping all the galaxies in the cosmos together, truly making dark matter a fundamental force keeping all of reality together. Now, if you're a dark elf or one of the aliens that lived in the science fictional MCU after the Big Bang, but before the Celestials got around to making stars in the cosmos, the greatest source of dark matter you know will probably be the ether, a force of primordial darkness, which Odin notes in Thor 2 has the ability to turn regular baryonic matter into dark matter, which the dark elf leader Malekith wanted to use to turn every atomic particle of light and all of the stars those atomic particles made into dark matter. However, because the mysteries of this invisible dark matter stuff is elusive as hell, Marvel and other sci-fi writers tend to take creative liberties as to what dark matter can actually do. And in the MCU, they've not only tied dark matter to the concept of having the ability to control light matter, but also tied it to how darkness tends to seek to absorb light in general, which is why red chaos reality energy in the MCU primarily deals with the absorption and control of light, and tends to be favored by beings that favor the darkness. Like how the Dark Elves use red reality dark matter energy for their red engines that they place in front of their ships, because they use that chaos energy's ability to absorb to literally pull their ships forward rather than push their ships forward from behind like regular spaceships and planes do. Or how those dark elves use those same dark matter engines within those ships to completely cloak themselves, even from the all-seeing eyes of Heimdall, whose yellow eyes can only see the universe of regular ass baryonic matter, which is why he could not see Jane Foster as soon as she got the ether trapped in her body. Or even how the dark elves use dark matter for their black hole grenades that make these super cool tiny temporary black holes. Hank Pym actually mastered this red chaos reality science to find a way to absorb atomic energy and shrink people in size, while also mastering the art of expanding himself to super huge proportions when he was studying the blue dark energy tesseract with Howard Stark at that military base in the past in Avengers Endgame. And this is why Ant-Man's red discs shrink stuff while his blue ones expand and grow stuff. And since red reality chaos energy is linked extremely closely to human emotions and is super reactive to them, Yondu Udonta is actually one of the greatest reality energy manipulators around in the MCU, as he uses the emotions in his heart to manipulate the chaos energy to fly his arrow. And of course, we cannot talk about red reality energy without talking about the Scarlet Witch, the greatest human energy sponge of all time, whose emotion-fueled dark matter absorption powers led her to absorbing all of the Mind Stone energy that Vision was made out of into her body, saving all of Vision inside of her. This is of course before she would use those very same chaos powers to absorb all of the purple energy out of Agatha Harkness, and then follow that up by trying to suck all of America Chavez's blue space energy powers as well, which allow America to hop realities just like the Tesseract allowed Captain Carter and that giant squid from What If to do the same. But chaos energy isn't always represented as red. Because of its ties to darkness, black is also one of the major colors of chaos in the MCU. For example, the Venom symbiotes, the Necrosword, and the Ebony Blade are all dark matter chaos energy beings / weapons as well, as they absorb energy from their hosts and their victims just like the ether does. And like I said before, on top of energy absorption, reality energy in the MCU allows for light manipulation, not only allowing chaos energy users to become invisible completely like we see Wanda do in WandaVision and the dark elf ships do in Thor 2, but it also allows the users to manipulate light, especially the light found within the human brain, which is why Wanda, the Black Widow's Red Room, and the Darkhold can manipulate minds. And it's the same science tied to Bucky's mind control as well, courtesy of the North Institute. And this all seems tied to this old scientific theory called the luminiferous ether, which theorizes about an invisible force that facilitates the travel of photon particles within the cosmos. It's a super old scientific theory that has been debunked for a while now, but it seems like Marvel Studios has found some inspiration from that luminiferous ether theory when creating the ether and chaos energy for their fictional universe. But anyways, this all being said, these three core aspects of the universe, matter, dark energy, and dark matter, are each represented represented by the three primary colors, yellow, blue, and red, respectively. It is by combining these colors and their effects that understanding the other three colors can become possible. For example, when the red celestial Arishem made human blood red, I believe he designed that human blood to be chaos energy juice, capable of absorbing the evolving rays of starlight. However, Arishem goofed up and gave the deviants a similar blood biology to humans, which is why Arishem corrected his mistake by making the Eternals robots without any real blood. Now, the reason why I'm saying all this is because the red reality chaos energy within human blood combined with yellow solar mind evolution energy coursing through the human nervous system equals the soul. Like, that is soul energy, because the soul is what is inside of you, and there ain't nothing else inside of you but blood and your nervous system. Soul energy is the essence of a concept called negentropy, which is essentially humanity's tenacity for survival. Yellow mind energy is merely evolution energy, with red human blood being made to absorb that energy. Yellow mind energy is powerful, but it's merely evolution energy. Without the red reality chaos blood to absorb all that evolution energy, humans would not be able to evolve and do dope shit like become sorcerers. The sorcerers of Kamar-Taj literally extract their inner soul energy light in order to perform their magic, which is why literally anybody who walks into Kamar-Taj can learn magic, and why Ned could open a portal with a sling ring in No Way Home by using a combination of his thoughts and his feelings. One of the most prominent orange soul energy users in the MCU has got to be Aldrich Killian, aka the true Mandarin of the MCU. Using a combination of electric nanites within red chaos blood, Aldrich Killian managed to find a way to hack the human nervous system to trigger their evolution early. The reason Marvel Studios made Aldrich Killian the Mandarin is because he is literally an orange soul singularity powered man. And like Wenwu noted in Shang-Chi, a Mandarin is an orange. So Marvel Studios intentionally made Aldrich Killian's alter ego a pun. But that's just orange soul energy. What happens when you combine some yellow mind energy with some blue space energy that loves to expand and amplify that mind energy's potential? You get yourself some really powerful green shit. However, because light itself is on a bit of a spectrum, this amplified light is gonna have more than one type of green infinity energy power. There's actually two, as the green energies of the MCU represent both the scientific concepts of gravity as well as gamma radiation. But let's start with gravity, because that one is more closely related to the time stone. In science, gravity and time are linked, like inextricably. In some places in the cosmos, time moves drastically different than here on Earth, like on Sakaar, where a mysterious gravitational anomaly on that planet not only causes a bunch of wormholes to dominate their skies, but also allowed the Hulk son Scar to age into a young man in the small amount of time that Bruce was gone. Time is relative to gravity, and gravity is determined by how much mass the planet that you're on has. So every time Doctor Strange uses the time stone, he basically just manipulates the laws of gravity that hold our universe and time together. However, if you mess too much with gravity and the laws of time, you risk unraveling the very fabric of reality itself. I believe Shang-Chi's necklace to be another type of gravity stone in the MCU, as we can see clearly when Wenwu inserts his necklace into the eyes of his stone dragon, causing all the water around them to float in the air. Shang-Chi's mom and aunt were insanely talented gravity manipulators who lived in a realm cursed with wormholes just like Sakaar was. But instead of aliens coming out of portals, Ta Lo usually gets visits from dangerous dragon dwellers in darkness instead. And a really great example of green MCU gravity at work is Morag from the Kree Star Force, who uses green gravity gauntlets to fight. However, because green energy in the MCU is just yellow solar evolution energy amplified by blue dark energy, it is also tied to humans drastically amplifying the evolution of their muscles, much like we see with both Bruce Banner and Norman Osborn. Instead of using yellow Vita rays like Dr. Erskine used on Captain America to evolve his physical form, Bruce Banner used green gamma rays in conjunction with the super soldier serum, which enhanced his muscles to a ridiculous degree. However, because green gamma radiation does have yellow mind energy as one of its main ingredients, that gamma radiation came packaged with a whole nother consciousness, the Hulk consciousness. And the same thing happened with the Green Goblin serum, which made Norman stronger at the expense of having the yellow mind energies of the Goblin consciousness hitching a ride inside with that green goblin gas. And finally, let us talk about the main Infinity Stone energy of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, the purple power singularity. Using regular color science, we know that purple consists of both blue and red, which in the MCU are blue space dark energy and red reality chaos dark matter. Since dark energy and dark matter are two things humanity knows little about due to their dark nature, Marvel Studios decided to take major creative liberties to how they applied it in the MCU. So I'm gonna need you guys to put your sci-fi caps on extra tight here. Since blue dark energy expands and amplifies the other energies, much like it expands all of space in the universe, what do you think it's gonna do to red chaos reality energy that already loves to absorb energy? It's gonna amplify that absorption power. So because of this, purple power energy is tied to both black holes as well as a special type of star called a neutron star, because those are the two main options a star has whenever it finally dies in a huge supernova explosion. Either it becomes a black hole that sucks all the nearby particles into it, or it becomes a neutron star, an incredibly powerful star whose power can last hundreds of trillions of years. And it's the same type of star that helped forge both Mjolnir and Stormbreaker. The design of the orb itself is modeled after a neutron star, with the power stone at the center supposed to represent the core of that neutron star. And in a different but similar way, black holes also have a ton of energy at their cores as well, as that raw power is literally being crushed and forged by the weight of its own gravity. The power stone is supposed to represent an impossibly strong singularity of power forged through immense pressure and absorption. But anyways, the point is, all the purple power energies of the MCU are just amplified darkness responsible for amplified absorption, which is why only beings of incredible cosmic power and resilience can hold the power stone without dying. Beings like the Celestials, who were literally made to create stars. Peter Quill, the son of a Celestial, is literally the Star Lord because he can control and make stars just like a Celestial can. And at the very end of the movie, we can see him and the Guardians standing in the middle of a dark star that they make by holding the power stone. So they themselves became the core of the star they made, effectively recreating the orb. The power stone literally absorbs the user's essence while also gifting it an overload of power. Like great examples of dark power energy absorbers in the MCU are Agatha Harkness, Dormammu, Miss Marvel and Dar-Ben from the Marvels, Black Panther's black vibranium suit, Arthur Harrow from Moon Knight, and very likely Galactus in the upcoming Fantastic Four, the hungriest motherfucker of them all. A lot of these beings' appetites for power are directly proportional to how much purple absorption energy is within them, because that is what determines their hunger levels. But yeah, that is the Marvel trigger theory in a nutshell. Thank you guys so much for listening to this super long section of this video. It is one of the most important Easter eggs in this movie in my opinion, and literally the theory that I'm most proud of in my entire life, because it is applicable to literally every Marvel Studios project. Even the recent X-Men 97, where we can see the Power Stone itself hiding in the background in Forge's workshop in an episode focused around the purple power absorbing science of Sentinel technology. Marvel Studios does not play around with their colors. Kevin Feige is truly a genius. After Peter uses a magnetic device to retrieve the Power Stone from its pedestal, notice how the shield surrounding the orb is deactivated as soon as the orb itself was removed from it. This implies that the orb was powering its own security shields, which also implies that the people who lived on Morag before they abandoned it really didn't want anyone retrieving the sacred item from this shrine. And the orb powering its own shields makes sense considering that this planet is completely destroyed and there isn't any other power source to power these shields. But anyways, pretty much as soon as Peter retrieves the orb, here comes Ronan the Accuser's goons, led by his right-hand man, Korath the Pursuer, who we learn in Captain Marvel used to be a member of the Kree Star Force before defecting from the Kree Empire completely to join Ronan and his group of dark aliens. But since Captain Marvel takes place 19 years before Guardians 1, things change, and a major change that Korath underwent within those 19 years were major cybernetic augmentations to his body. Augmentations that also enhance his durability through his genetics as well. Peter calls the Sicarian soldiers trying to restrain him Ninja Turtles as a shout out to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, who were quite big before Peter left the planet in 1988, because Turtlemania was a big thing. I talk about it in my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1990 breakdown that you guys can watch here. James Gunn would make another reference to the Ninja Turtles in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 when the High Evolutionary would mutate a turtle himself. As their name implies, the Sicarians are actually the true natives of the Grand Master's planet of Sakaar. You know, before all those random people showed up through a bunch of wormholes and got trapped there. And these aliens are hella ugly, bro. Like later on in the movie, when a group of them are about to be turned to Swiss cheese by Yondu, one of them actually takes off their mask to reveal an ugly-ass, bony, insect-like creature underneath, with that particular maskless Sicarian threatening Yondu being played made by director James Gunn himself, which is hilarious and awesome. I'm super glad that those masks do a great job at shielding their faces from the light, because ain't nobody trying to see all that all the time. But anyways, after narrowly escaping capture, Peter Quill hops onto his ship called the Milano, which Peter named after 80s star Alyssa Milano, who he had a huge crush on. Peter has custom painted his Milano to be orange and blue, which is not so coincidentally the same colors of Ego's car that we see him driving with Meredith at the beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. As Peter is escaping Korath and his goons, objects in Peter's ship go full zero gravity for a few moments, allowing us to see one of Peter's troll dolls floating through the air. Peter would use one of these troll dolls to trick Yondu by the end of this movie. When Peter manages to stabilize his ship, he realizes that his booty call from the night before was still there. A booty call named Barit, wearing the same River Rafter shirt that he was wearing when he got traumatized, which is kind of really weird, and Sigmund Freud would probably have something to say about that. Barit is part of the pink-skinned Krylorian race in the MCU, just like her character is in the comics. However, in the comics, Barit was actually introduced as a famous film director on her planet of Krylor in The Incredible Hulk 269, but her films were literally just straight up her recordings of her real-life experiences with the Incredible Hulk that she merely presented as fiction. So she's a pretty interesting character, to be honest. And while Peter is recuperating from his brush with Korath, he gets a call from his space pirate dad Yondu, who chews Peter out for stealing the orb job from Yondu's clan of Ravagers. And in typical foreign dad fashion, Yondu tells Peter that he's lucky to be alive, and God, I've gotten that on more than one occasion. But Yondu says it's because some of his boys wanted to eat Peter, which Yondu then later tells Peter in Guardians 2 he meant as a joke. However, there actually is some truth to that statement, because Yondu's former colleague, Ego, did technically want to eat Peter, and Yondu did keep that from happening by keeping Peter as one of his Ravagers. As Peter hangs up on Yondu, Yondu then orders that a bounty be placed on Peter, but for him to be brought back alive because Yondu secretly doesn't want Peter killed. When some of Yondu's fellow Ravagers disagree with Yondu's decision, Yondu quickly whips out his Yaka arrow to keep his boys in line. A Yaka arrow that Yondu controls with a special control fin implanted within his head that taps into his emotional state. Because like Yondu tells Peter in Guardians 2 and Kraglin in Guardians 3, in order to fly the arrow, one has to use their heart. This is vastly different to the original Yondu found in the Marvel Comics, who sported a much bigger fin. However, James Gunn did not want to give his clumsy best friend Michael Rooker a big-ass fin to fight with while he was filming his first major superhero film, so he opted to give Yondu a much smaller mohawk. But speaking of the other members of Yondu's group of Ravagers, a lot of them were actually James Gunn's personal friends that he loves working with one of those friends being Rob Zombie, whose voice can be heard as a Ravager navigator later on in the movie. However, the most poppin' of all of these Ravagers these days is of course Mr. Ralph Ineson himself, as Ralph Ineson just recently got announced as the MCU's Galactus in their first Fantastic Four film. But before he was a giant purple planet eater, Ineson can be seen as one of Yondu's Ravagers later on in this movie. Then we are brought to Ronan's ship, the Dark Aster, or in other words, the Dark Star, because the word Aster is another word for star. The coordinates for the Dark Aster are these weird mixture of letters and numbers that are modeled off of how real celestial star coordinates are seen in real life. However, because James Gunn is a clever wizard of a writer, we can see that these Dark Aster coordinates are just one of many coordinates throughout this movie that have a secret message hidden within. If you switch the numbers of these coordinates to their corresponding number position on the alphabet, you get the words, "This is Mom's cancer," with the mom in this case of course referring to Peter's mother Meredith Quill and her brain cancer, and the Dark Star being Ego of the Living Planet, who himself is basically one massive red dark celestial star with a glowing blue brain at its core. In a similar vein, the coordinates to Xandar's prison, the Kyln, and the Collector's Home of Nowhere both have hidden messages as well, with the Kyln's coordinates translating to "This isn't real," and Nowhere utilizing the Leet-speak language to translate to Meredith Quill LX, with the Nowhere coordinate translation being an original discovery from yours truly because I have no life. You can check out my entire Guardians of the Galaxy Easter egg hunt over at my YouTube channel at youtube.com/mastertainment. And while what I'm about to say has not been confirmed, I do believe that the LX in Meredith Quill LX is an abbreviation for the word lux, with lux being the name of a unit of light measurement, with Meredith referring to her beloved baby daddy Ego as an angel composed of pure light. I believe that lux could be referring to Ego himself. But anyways, back to the Dark Aster ship itself, because the twisted exterior of the ship reminds me of a twisted double helix, like the ones found in human DNA, very much pointing to how the Dark Aster is not only Mom's cancer, but also a potential cancer to the cosmos, which we would see later when the Dark Aster would arrive on Xandar for Ronan to infect with the Power Stone. And the interior of the ship is just as bleak and cold as the outside, with that design choice being extremely intentional by James Gunn, as he based the design of that dark Kree ship off of real-world mausoleums where dead people are housed and stuff. And the reason for this design choice is rooted heavily within Ronan's Kree beliefs, drastic old beliefs that varied significantly from the way the actual modern Kree Empire functions at the time in 2014. Which we can actually see a little bit of later on when a Kree leader completely rejects Arani Rael's plea for help with dealing with Ronan the Accuser, because Ronan is no longer affiliated with the Kree like he used to be during the 90s when we saw him cameo alongside the Kree Accuser fleet in Captain Marvel. And it seems like the reason for this design choice primarily has to do with the type of crew that Ronan rolls with these days. When we first met Ronan the Accuser, we can see a group of strange-looking aliens helping him get dressed for another long day of questing for revenge and murder. These strange little helpers are called Exelon monks, and their inclusion in this movie could explain a lot about Ronan the Accuser, particularly why this dude is so damn powerful in this movie. When the concept of the Exelon was first introduced within the original Marvel Comics in the pages of Annihilation Conquest Wraith #2, we learned that the Exelon parasites were originally parasites that infected a group of early Kree explorers thousands of years in the past, turning those early Kree from normal blue bitches into these gray, gloomy goons called the Nameless. These Exelon symbiotic parasites were created a long time ago by the dark primordial being Null, who was trying to create the symbiotes at the time, with these Exelon parasites being failed byproducts of those experiments. However, because the Exelon were meant to be symbiotic dark beings, much like their symbiote cousins that you see in your favorite Spider-Man comics, these Exelon parasites would serve to empower their hosts with superhuman strength, regeneration, and virtual immortality, at the cost of their identity and soul, with only the strongest willed Kree maintaining a sense of self, and the character Wraith is one of those strongly willed Kree. I'm kind of bummed that we don't see Wraith anymore in the Marvel Comics, because Wraith is kind of a really cool character, but it appears that Ronan the Accuser himself appears to be the Wraith of this movie in terms of power. While the Exelon monks found in Guardians 1 aren't exactly like the dark Kree called the Nameless that we see in the comics, using what we know about the Exelon parasites in the comics in relation to the Kree, it appears that the implication of their involvement with Ronan in this movie is as a sect of dark Kree. Dark Kree who followed the old laws of the Kree before the Kree Empire became a bunch of soft baby back bitches. It seems that sometime after the events of Captain Marvel, Ronan the Accuser left the Kree not just because of ideological differences, but also in the pursuit of power for himself. It seems like his encounter with Captain Marvel might have inspired him to get more juiced up himself, which could have led him into the arms of the Kree of old, who seem to have taught him all about the ancient forgotten ways of his people and used their mastery of dark sciences to give him enhanced strength and endurance, possibly at the expense of his body's life force, which could be why Ronan has to routinely dunk himself in the liquid life force blood of his enemies, much like we see Ronan do when we first meet him. And this could also be why Ronan is able to absorb and withstand the full power of the Power Stone in the palm of his hand without dying, something that only Celestials have been known to do. And when we get a close-up of Ronan's eyes when we first meet him when he's getting dressed, you can see just how much the darkness has started to overtake him just by how much the darkness has started to infect his eyes. But anyways, given that the Exelon have such strong comic ties to the Kree from long ago, I would not be surprised if the Exelon were the ones who led Ronan to the orb on Morag in the first place, as Morag could very well be the Kree planet that these Exelon monks came from before their planet went to shit thousands of years ago. So yeah, the reason why the Dark Aster is themed after a mausoleum appears to be linked to the dark and death-centric religion that these dark Kree follow. And by choosing Ronan as their main warrior, these Exelon monks appear to be just as invested in his mission to avenge all of the Kree that were slain in the 1,000-year Kree Nova War, which is thematically fitting considering that these dark Kree are fighting with the Nova Empire, an empire themed around 3 suns that orbit its capital planet Xandar. So it's literally a dark race versus a light race. Where's Martin Luther King when you need him? And when Ronan gets all of his armor on, you can see a red star painted on his chest, possibly alluding to the name of the Dark Aster ship itself, and also foreshadowing to a certain dark star that we came across in the Marvels in 2000. 2023. The very first shot of the Marvels opens with a red dark star hovering over the Kree homeworld of Hala, a consequence of Captain Marvel destroying the Supreme Intelligence shortly after she left Earth 30 years prior in the 1990s. Much like that red dark star proved to be a cancer to the suffering people of the Kree in that movie, it appears that Ronan dons a red dark star on his chest to symbolically show how he and his Exelon Monk gang are a cosmic cancer in their own right. If the Dark Aster ship is indeed a reference to the dark star that has plagued Hala for decades, then the coordinates translating to a dark star being Mom's cancer is super fitting, considering that Ego the Living Planet is also a big old red cancerous celestial star himself. But anyways, after Ronan bonks the head of a Xandarian soldier, he orders Gamora to go retrieve the orb from the broker on the planet Xandar, which is where we run into everyone's favorite adorable bounty hunters, Rocket Raccoon and Groot. While using a scanner to search for hot bounties, Rocket spots a wild Stan Lee spitting some game at a Xandarian woman. In the corner of Rocket's screen, the word Excelsior can be seen written in the Skrull language, which is hilarious considering that Excelsior was of course one of Stan Lee's favorite words to say. But then Rocket of course spots Star-Lord saying goodbye to his booty call Barit before heading in to give the orb to the broker. However, unfortunately for Peter, the broker kicks him out immediately when he realizes that Ronan is also after the orb himself. And your boy the broker ain't trying to get involved in no terrorism. This broker is actually based on the broker character from the Marvel Comics that was introduced in 1995's Force Works number 15. That broker was actually a slave trader. So you know, my black ass is glad MCU broker is conducting more legitimate forms of business. The Zodiac Key can be seen in one of the broker's glass cases, which is a reference to the powerful Zodiac Key artifact from the Marvel Comics, an item capable of insanely powerful cosmic blasts and the ability to teleport people across impossible distances. In Daredevil number 73, we learn that the Zodiac Key was created by this group of humanoid aliens called the Brotherhood of the Ankh, who sent the Zodiac Key to Earth in hopes that it would help the balance of order and chaos on the planet. The Zodiac Key's presence within the broker's shop just shows you just how much the broker is not afraid to deal in artifacts of mass destruction like the orb. The MCU broker can be seen playing cards with Cosmo, Kraglin, and the gang on Nowhere in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. But anyways, after Peter exits the broker's place, he is immediately kicked in the stomach by Gamora after failing to flirt with her. And you know what? Been there, dude. Like, it's not fun. But an interesting fact about this moment is that Zoe Saldana straight up kicked Chris Pratt full force in the stomach here, causing him to immediately collapse to the ground and have a permanent bruise over his ribs for the entirety of filming. Like, Zoe straight up thought Chris was wearing the protective gear that they always wear when they practice fighting together, but Chris forgot to wear the protective gear that day and didn't tell her, so it's kind of his fault. But of course, while Peter is chasing Gamora, Rocket and Groot start chasing after their bounty Star-Lord, causing all four of them to pretty much immediately get arrested by the Nova Corps. While they're being lined up and processed, we can of course see their rap sheets. Some interesting details in Gamora's rap sheet include aspects of her biology, which reveal that Gamora possesses a cybernetic skeleton, implants in her eyes and respiratory system, an enhanced neurological system, and an enhanced regeneration implant. So while her augmentations weren't as drastic and noticeable as her sister Nebula's, Gamora is still very much a super soldier cyborg herself, due to the cruel enhancements of her mad scientist of a father, Thanos. On Rocket's rap sheet, he's identified as Subject 89P13, as that is the name given to him by his creator, the High Evolutionary, a discovery that wouldn't be revealed until Guardians 3, along with the fact that the prefix 89 is referring to the High Evolutionary's Batch 89, which consisted of Rocket, Teefs, Floor, and Lila. His homeworld is listed as Half-World, with Half-World being another name for Counter-Earth, which we see get completely decimated in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Half-World was also Rocket Raccoon's homeworld of origin in the Marvel Comics when Rocket was first introduced in the pages of the Incredible Hulk 271. Also introduced in that issue was Rocket's love interest Lila, who was mentioned along with Groot as one of Rocket's publicly known associates. Not sure why Floor and Teefs didn't make it, but I guess they weren't cool enough. Rocket's past crimes include 13 counts of theft, 22 counts of escaping incarceration, 7 counts of mercenary activity, and 15 counts of arson. On Group's rap sheet, we can see that your boy Big Treasy has 3 counts of grievous bodily harm, 15 counts of escape from incarceration, and 3 counts of mercenary activity. Rocket Raccoon is of course listed as one of Groot's known associates, alongside a mysterious person named Tibius Lark. For years, people have wondered who the hell this Tibius Lark person is, and if they would ever show up in the Guardians trilogy to shed a little bit more light on on adult Groot's past. However, because James Gunn is a down-to-earth king, he took to Instagram to answer this question. According to Gunn, Tibius Lark was a robot that used to be a zookeeper at a shitty galactic zoo that used to have Groot as one of its main exhibits. After forming a super tight bond, the two would eventually find themselves captured and imprisoned within a deep underground well, with the robot Tibius Lark getting fatally injured sometime during his imprisonment. And while they were there in prison, they came across Rocket Raccoon, who was coincidentally there for some other crime. And because the lower half of Tibius Lark's robot body was destroyed, Tibius knew that he wasn't long for this world, so he begged Rocket to take care of his best friend Groot while he was gone. Then Rocket would use the remains of Tibius's body to fashion himself a machine gun to bust him and Groot out of prison. James Gunn initially intended to make the story into a short film, but never found the time to do it due to the production of Guardians 1 demanding more of his attention. But God, does it sound like an incredibly moving deleted scene for damn sure. But anyways, on Peter's rap sheet, his code name is listed completely wrong, with the Nova Corps listing him as Space Lord instead of Star-Lord, which is hilarious. But while this was of course meant as a joke, calling Star-Lord Space Lord actually makes sense considering that Ego the Living Planet himself was a massive dark celestial star that was composed out of blue space stone type energy. An energy linked to a scientific concept called dark energy, which is responsible for the expansion of the universe. And expansion is exactly what Ego is all about. The crimes that Peter Quill has been arrested for in the past are 1 count of fraud, 2 counts of public intoxication, 1 count of assault, and 1 count of illegal manipulation of a Gramoshian duchess, implying that Peter slept with a Gramoshian princess and got arrested for it. The Gramoshians are a race of super dark-skinned aliens who once tried to steal the Earth's electromagnetic field along with the energy inside of Thor's hammer, and in that end, they sent their best agent to Earth to take it from them, an agent who would become the Thor villain Mercurio the 4D Man, and you can read all about that weird-ass story in Thor number 208. But anyways, while Peter is getting processed, to his right you can see that the Nova Corps is scanning Peter's DNA, with the Nova Corps finding something really strange about his DNA that they would later bring up to Peter at the very end of the film when they tell him that his father was someone impossibly ancient, teasing the coming of the celestial Ego the Living Planet in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And while they're showing Peter a scan of his body, you can see a bright yellow flame at the center of his chest, with this yellow flame supposed to hint at Peter's celestial lineage as the son of a cosmic star. And it's a bright solar flame that I believe is supposed to mirror the flame of the original Guardians of the Galaxy uniform design from the Marvel Comics and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. But anyways, as the group get processed in the Kyln, Peter mentions that the orb has a shiny blue suitcase, Ark of the Covenant, Maltese Falcon sort of vibe, with the shiny blue suitcase being a reference to the 1955 film Kiss Me Deadly, Ark of the Covenant being a reference to 1981's Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Maltese Falcon being a reference to the 1941 film The Maltese Falcon. Then, after Peter gets beat up because a prison guard stole his Walkman to jam out to Hooked on a Feeling by Blue Swede, Peter gets hosed down by some weird orange Kids' Choice Award slime before showing off his shredded abs. And speaking of Chris Pratt's abs, it was actually those abs that helped him score his role as Star-Lord big time, as Marvel took a chance on Chris after seeing the selfie he posted of himself shirtless while on the set of 2012's Zero Dark 30. To prepare for the role, Chris Pratt trained for 6 months in order to lose 60 pounds, when the production only needed him to lose 50, which is actually pretty hardcore. However, James Gunn was actually so impressed with Chris Pratt's audition that he said that he was even willing to just CGI a six-pack onto Chris's body if that's what it took to secure him for the film. Chris Pratt apparently beat out a good number of people who screen tested for Star-Lord, including Glenn Howerton from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, John Krasinski from The Office, Zachary Levi, Aaron Paul, James Marsden, Jensen Ackles, Eddie Redmayne, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and even Lee Pace, with Pace eventually landing the role of Ronan instead. And while the group is getting changed into their prison uniforms, Peter gets his first look at Rocket's tortured past by getting a glimpse at Rocket's tortured back, where pieces of his cybernetic enhancements can be seen sticking out. Then, as the group enter general population for the first time, the prisoners there start yelling at them for some reason, with one of those prisoners being Mr. Lloyd Kaufman, the founder of Troma Entertainment and the man who gave James Gunn his very first job in the industry as a writer for the 1996 movie Romeo and Juliet. To defend his new ally Star-Lord from getting picked on from one of these prisoners, adult Groot shoves his fingers up this alien's nostrils to pick him up, with that giant blue alien being played by acting legend Nathan Fillion, who was a longtime personal friend of James Gunn. And because of that, Fillion would work with James Gunn again in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 as an Orgo Corp security guard, as well as in DC's The Suicide Squad as the detachable kid when he was almost instantaneously killed. Spoiler alert, by the way, and honestly, if you haven't watched The Suicide Squad yet, what are you doing? Literally one of the best comic book movies ever made. Like, get on that shit. However, before the alien Fillion is picked up, he tells Peter that he's going to slather him up in Ganavian jelly, which is a reference to the unremarkable Ganavian race from the planet Gunna in the Marvel Comics, with Zaku the Sunstealer being the most prominent person from that weird-looking race. Then a little bit later, during sleeping hours, Gamora is confronted by Drax the Destroyer himself, played expertly by WWE superstar Dave Bautista, who actually cried when he got offered the role and left the WWE in order to prioritize the marketing of this movie. And though Dave Bautista was actually the only actor who was ever offered the opportunity to play Drax, other actors who auditioned include Jason Momoa, Isaiah Mustafa, Brian Patrick Wade, and the late and great Chadwick Boseman, who ultimately became the greatest Black Panther ever. Zoe Saldana herself also beat out a few actresses for the role of Gamora, such as Rachel Nichols, Gina Carano, thank God, and Adrienne Palicki, with Palicki later on becoming Agent Bobby Morse in ABC's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Both Olivia Wilde and Amanda Seyfried rejected offers to play Gamora, with Amanda not wanting to because she didn't want to have to dye her skin green for an extended period of time and didn't feel like a movie about a talking tree and raccoon would actually sell. Zoe Saldana, on the other hand, actually preferred wearing the Gamora makeup rather than having to do mocap work, which she had to do on the set of Avatar 1. While trying to get Drax from killing Gamora, Peter brings up the past alien woman that he slept with, including a Kree woman, a Rayjack woman, and an Ascovarian, with that last one being particularly disgusting considering that they look like this. But hey, some people are into adult anime and tentacles are not a problem for them, so you know what, to each their own. After Drax, Gamora, and Peter all agree to a truce, the scene transitions to the other summoning Ronan the Accuser to have an audience with the Infinity Saga's big bad Thanos himself, with Josh Brolin taking over the role of Thanos from actor Damien Poitier, who played him in Avengers 1. Brolin used inspiration from Colonel Kurtz from the 1979 film Apocalypse Now in order to channel the intensity that he needed for Thanos in this scene. And while Ronan is trying to explain himself to Thanos, the other keeps rudely interrupting him. So to shut that motherfucker up, Ronan uses his Cosmo Rod to snap the other's neck, causing the blindfold that always covers the other's yellow eyes to be exposed before he falls over. In the Marvel Comics, the Other is actually one of the names of the Dark Elder God Chthon way back in the day, but the MCU decided to have the Other just be associated with Thanos and the Chitauri army instead. So the Other is clearly meant to be regarded as a being associated with darkness, especially given the color of his yellow eyes. In nature, creatures typically have yellow eyes in order to help them see in the dark, and it seems like the Other and his race of aliens have evolved to do so in a similar way, given the Other's refusal to let his eyes be exposed to light. Thanos' least favorite daughter Nebula is next to him, played by former Doctor Who companion Karen Gillan, who actually physically shaved her head for the role. In the comics, Nebula originally had a full head of hair before she decided to steal the Infinity Gauntlet from her abusive father Thanos. However, the power of the gauntlet was way too much for her and causes Nebula to fall into a catatonic state, forcing her body and mind to need extensive cybernetic upgrades, courtesy of this sketchy-ass surgeon by the name of Dr. Mandibus. And ever since that surgery in Silver Surfer number 73, Nebula has been a bald-ass badass. But back at the prison, Groot, being the impatient king that he is, accidentally triggers Rocket's escape plan early by removing a Quarnex battery and triggering a lockdown. While scrambling to enact Rocket's escape plan, Rocket tricks Peter into stealing the prosthetic leg of one of the prisoners. Knowing what we do now about Rocket's torturous past under the High Evolutionary, it seems that Rocket's past trauma has fueled his current sense of humor, because Rocket routinely had his body parts removed and replaced. After the Guardians break into the security control room, Rocket, being the little rodent genius that he is, decides to disable the gravity in order to facilitate the Guardians' escape, which is a move that Star-Lord would later copy in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 when needing to escape Orgo Corp. after Star-Lord secures his Walkman from the prison guard, Escape by Rupert Holmes plays as he floats back to the Milano. Soon after this, Star-Lord calls Rocket Ranger Rick, a reference to the popular children's nature magazine that released its first issue in January 1967, with Ranger Rick being an anthropomorphic raccoon that serves as a park ranger, which definitely feels like a funny piece of foreshadowing for Rocket's eventual role as a Guardian of the Galaxy, which is kind of a galactic park ranger in a way. After the group argues for a little bit, Star-Lord references the painter Jackson Pollock when he says that a black light would reveal body fluid stains reminiscent of one of his works, which is super gross. The scene then transitions to showing us the Collector and his Krylorian assistant Karina getting ready for Gamora's arrival. In the comics, Karina is actually the name of the Collector's daughter, but here she's just one of his many disposable assistants. In the background of the scene, you can actually see one of Malekith's dark elves sleeping in one of the Collector's cages. Some other notable prisoners that appear inside of the Collector's collection later on include both Howard the Duck and Cosmo the Space Dog, who not only appear in the post-credit scene of this movie, but also would become permanent residents of Nowhere as of the events of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Actually, in Guardians 3, while Howard and Cosmo are playing cards, Cosmo reveals that he left the planet Earth during the 1960s as part of the Soviet Union's desire to reach space before the US. And seeing that the 1960s is around the same time that the Fantastic Four movie will be taking place, I would not be surprised to see the origins of Cosmo the Space Dog being told at some point during the Fantastic Four movie, with MCU Cosmo very likely getting her powers in a very similar way to the Fantastic Four through mysterious cosmic space radiation. But then Gamora finally leads the Guardians to Nowhere, the severed head of a Celestial who was killed an impossibly long time ago. In the comics, we learn that the Celestial was actually decapitated by the old dark primordial god Null, who then used the Celestial's insides in order to forge the Necrosword, a sword that Gore the God Butcher would take from Null's unconscious body. As the Guardians fly through Nowhere's skull, Gamora remarks about how Taneleer Tavon and his corporation, the Tavon Group, have been capitalizing off of the Celestial's death for an extremely long period of time, with time being something that the Collector actually has ample amounts of as one of Marvel's infamous Elders of the Universe. The Collector is a ridiculously old man, so old in fact, that we actually see the Collector's ship escaping from what looks to be his old native universe at the very beginning of the Loki Season 1 finale, which was a surprising fact revealed by Marvel VFX supervisor Brad Parker. That opening sequence showing the Collector escaping what appears to be the collapsing of an entire universe very much implies that the Collector is not from the 616 universe at all, but likely the survivor of the Big Crunch of a previous universe. If you don't know what the Big Crunch is, it's basically the very opposite of the concept of the Big Bang, with some scientists theorizing that after a certain point of constant expansion, the universe would one day rapidly begin to contract, collecting all that energy that has ever existed back into a singular hot dense state of super condensed energy ready for another Big Bang. And this revelation kind of makes sense considering what actor Benicio del Toro has said about his character the Collector in the past, with del Toro describing his character as a bit like Noah from the Bible, with his collection being compared to Noah's Ark. Del Toro says that the Collector foresees a big cataclysm coming, so part of the reason why he collects stuff is to preserve those items and aliens and cultures so that they can survive whatever is coming. And for the longest time, I was like, yo, what the hell is the Collector even preparing for? I mean, is it Thanos? Is it Ultron? Like, what is it? But this Loki Season 1 finale has apparently answered this question, as the Collector seems to be preparing for the natural end of the universe itself through some type of Big Crunch scenario. But anyways, yes, the Collector has been around for a very long time, mining the resources from the Celestial head, mainly the Celestial's bone tissue and spinal fluid, with this long-lived Elder of the Universe most likely selling a lot of this organic material to the High Evolutionary himself, because if you look at OrgoCorp as a whole, that whole place looks really freakishly weird as it is completely made out of organics, and knowing that the High Evolutionary has a major god complex, I would not put it past him to build his OrgoCorp out of the same celestial biology that Nowhere was made out of, so I highly suspect the High Evolutionary and Taneleer Tavon to have been business partners at some point. But anyways, as the Guardians start to walk through Nowhere, Peter starts listing off some outlaws from the planet Earth, including Billy the Kid, Bonnie and Clyde, and Full House actor John Stamos for some reason, with Drax quickly replying that he would like to see Earth someday because of them, which is something that Drax and Mantis end up doing in the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. Then the Guardians approach one of the Collector's bars called the Boot of Jemiah, with Jemiah being the name of one of Ereshim's Celestials. The name Boot of Jemiah could be a reference to the time that Jemiah put his boot down on the Kree homeworld. Both the Collector and his Elder of the Universe brother, the Grandmaster, both have a fascination with celestial culture, as the Grandmaster pretty much surrounds himself by a bunch of people wearing celestial cosplay. So either both of these Elders of the Universe are fascinated with the concept of becoming celestials, or their past was heavily influenced by the Celestials, which could be why this Collector knows so much about celestial destruction habits. And hey, once you live as long as a Collector, you probably see at least one or two or several thousand planets get decimated by the Celestials in their quest to seed and evolve life throughout the cosmos. After Peter and Gamora listen to Fooled Around and Fell in Love by Elvin Bishop, Peter stops a fight between Rocket and Drax where Rocket emotionally opens up about his tortured past. But before things can get too deep, the Collector calls the group up to his museum. As Rocket and the Guardians are introduced to the Collector, Rocket walks past Cosmo the Space Dog, who growls at Rocket out of natural instinct, considering that dogs and raccoons normally don't get along. One of the members of Thanos' Chitauri army can be seen behind Rocket across from Cosmo the Space Dog as well. Not super far away from that Chitauri is a cage containing the slugs from James Gunn's 2006 film Slither, which also featured his bestie Michael Rooker. And not far away from that can be found an early primitive prototype of the Sovereign birthing pods that their leader Aisha would use to create her beloved beast of a son, Adam Warlock. The inclusion of this cocoon was meant to be a nod towards the cocoon that a secret group of asshole geniuses called the Enclave used to create Adam Warlock in the pages of Fantastic Four 66 and 67. However, I believe that this would not be the first time that we would see this cocoon science evolve an upgraded being for their people, as Steve Rogers from Captain America the First Avenger went through something very similar during his super soldier transformation. Before the machine that scrawny Steve is placed in closes up, you can see that there are a bunch of spherical nodes that are filled with this yellow energy, a special evolution energy called Vita Rays. Much like Dr. Erskine used these yellow Vita Rays to evolve Steve Rogers, Aisha used the yellow evolution energy from her Harbulary batteries to evolve Adam Warlock. Harbulary batteries that they were making by using the power of stars, because if you look closely, the entire structure of the sovereign planets all appear to be several Dyson spheres bundled close together, with Dyson spheres being a theoretical device meant to encase an entire sun in order to farm the solar energy from that sun. However, because he didn't have a fancy cocoon himself, the deviant Crow from Eternals had to evolve his body the hard way by sucking out the yellow evolution energy from inside of Eternals like Ajax and Gilgamesh instead. Like, it's all connected, guys. I'm telling you, Kevin Feige is a goddamn creative genius. I'm telling you. But a truly interesting moment happens directly after the Guardians are introduced to the Collector, because the first thing the Collector does when he sees the Guardians is express fascination at Groot and his species, as he has personally never seen one of Groot's species before, which is kind of wild considering how old this man is. Like, how do you not know of the Floor Colossus from Planet X? Kind of makes me wonder if Groot is unique to this specific universe. But shortly after this, Star-Lord accidentally drops the orb when he's trying to hand it to the Collector, which was a complete accident by actor Chris Pratt, but it caused James Gunn to laugh so much that he decided to keep it in the movie. Then the scene transitions to a drunk and pissed off Drax the Destroyer, who, in his anger, decides to summon Ronan to his location in order to exact revenge for his dead wife and daughter, who Ronan killed at the behest of Thanos. But in order to do this, Drax holds the local Nowhere dispatcher hostage, a dispatcher played by actor Stephen Blackheart, one of my favorite actors in the MCU, because he was a massive help for me in my Guardians of the Galaxy Easter egg hunt, so I will shout him out every time I see him in a movie or project. Love you, Mr. Blackheart, you're an amazing man. This Nowhere dispatcher named Steamy Blue Liver would return in a big way for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 when he helps load up Nowhere's defense systems to save the Guardians and the Star Children from the High Evolutionary, making Steamy Blue Liver one of the MCU MVPs. Steamy Blue Liver 2024. In order for Steamy to call Ronan the Accuser for Drax, he had to end his business phone call of ordering some Kotati seeds for the Collector. In the Marvel Comics, the Kotati are the super ancient race of plant-like beings that were hated by the Kree for centuries. The character Mantis from the comics actually gets married to one of these Kotati at one point and has a baby with them named Sequoia, who was apparently destined to be the celestial messiah of the entire Marvel universe. While Ronan the Accuser is on his way to nowhere, the Guardians sit through a surprise history lesson from the Collector, after the Collector uses this really weird machine to somehow access the memories of the Power Stone itself, a piece of technology extremely reminiscent of the memory monitoring devices that the Skrulls used on Captain Marvel in order to look through her memories. As the Collector's presentation starts with the very Big Bang itself, notice how this Big Bang looks a lot like the Big Bang that we see at the beginning of the Loki Season 1 finale, an event that the Collector himself was there for as well. As the Collector is explaining how the Infinity Stones came with the origin of the universe, images of the Infinity Stones themselves appear on one of his bubble screens. Bubble screens that look a lot like the Watcher's windows that he used to watch people in the Marvel comics. But one of the most interesting shots that happened during this presentation is this shot of one of the Morag panels found within that temple room where Peter found the orb. Because if you look at it, you'll notice that the Collector actually ends up mirroring the panels that we see when Peter arrives on the planet. Because behind Peter, Entropy and Infinity are on the left side, whereas on Morag they are on the right side, which is kind of weird. Then the Guardians are shown the Celestial Essen the Searcher, the very first Celestial that we see in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it's a Celestial who can be seen destroying a planet of terrified people with the power of the Power Stone, causing the surface of that planet to crack open and all of the lava from underneath the planet to shoot out, as we can see playing within the bubbles behind Star-Lord when he says that there's a little pea coming out of him right now. Essen the Searcher was introduced in the pages of Eternals Volume 1, Issue number 9, and I have a feeling that the reason why he was the specific Celestial chosen for this scene is tied to one of the final pages of that very issue, a page that says the words, "Essen knows power well," as Essen the Searcher uses his celestial abilities to drain a hidden deviant city of all of its power. And while witnessing a Celestial destroy a planet is super interesting and all, the details of what is happening to the left and right of the Celestial destruction are just as remarkable to me. Because on the left, we can see a figure of a blue alien wincing before ultimately getting destroyed by Essen the Searcher's judgment, with that alien likely being a member of the blue Kree race. And honestly, because of this blue face, I would not be surprised in the least if this entire planet that we see getting destroyed is Morag itself, a planet that very well could have existed along with the Dark Elves before the birth of all the light and stars in the universe, especially given what we see to the right of Essen the Searcher's destruction. Because if you pay close attention to that bubble on the top right of the screen near the Collector's head, you can see that a huge explosion in space occurs throughout the cosmos at the same exact moment that Essen the Searcher strikes the Power Stone onto the surface of this planet. Before that huge cosmic explosion, you can see that the cosmos detailed inside of this bubble is colored red, which I believe could be due to the cosmos being in that dark elf-dominated primordial time period before the Celestials came in and started making stars. Since only beings of extraordinary strength can wield an Infinity Stone, the presentation wraps up by the Collector showing the Guardians a group of mysterious robed aliens with goggles blowing the hell up after trying to distribute the energy of the Power Stone amongst themselves in hopes of controlling it, with those aliens probably being more aliens that lived during the Dark World period. And the reason why I think so is because of their goggles. I feel like they wear these goggles because they're not adjusted to living in a universe full of light, much like how the other used to blindfold his eyes. However, despite seeing these dudes blow up, the Collector's assistant Karina rebels against her master by trying to grab the Power Stone directly with her bare hand like a dingus, only for the energy of the Power Stone to travel through her nervous system up to her brain, causing Karina to overheat and explode, taking the rest of the Collector's Nowhere collection with her. But don't worry, even though the Collector's collection on Nowhere was destroyed, James Gunn has revealed that the Collector has multiple other collection store locations across the universe, so the destruction of this specific collection is pretty much only an annoying inconvenience for him. But since he is the Horde Master General of the Cosmos, I'm sure he's not exactly jazzed about losing even one of his things. Cosmo the Space Dog can be seen fleeing the premises following this explosion, but she ultimately comes back during the post-credits to give the Collector some much-needed kisses, which is kind of funny considering that the Collector likely treated Cosmo better than his own assistant Karina, who literally exploded herself just for a chance at freedom. But, you know, since Cosmo is a dog from the Soviet space program, I'm sure she was a lot used to being in a cage and following orders than Karina was. says. But anyways, while Rocket freaks out at Star-Lord for keeping such a dangerous weapon in his purse, Quill quickly corrects him by stating that he wears a knapsack, which feels like a reference to The Hangover when Bradley Cooper tells Zach Galifianakis' character that he's wearing a man purse. But unfortunately for the Guardians, Drax is a dingus and Ronan the Accuser arrives shortly after this to collect his orb, but not before wiping his ass with Drax the Destroyer and throwing Drax into this pool of what looks to be celestial spine fluid, which kind of makes me wonder whether or not Drax's biology was affected by that, because celestial spinal fluid seems to be some pretty powerful stuff, especially since it is such a hot black market commodity throughout the galaxy. But shortly after this, Nebula blows her sister's mining pod up and secures the orb for Ronan, leaving Gamora to die, but luckily the ultra-heroic Star-Lord gives Gamora his mask to save her, leaving him exposed to the cold void of space until Yondu and his Ravagers can pick him up. But during this moment, Peter's face begins to freeze up, something that retired astronaut Chris Hadfield says wouldn't actually happen considering that there's no water in outer space. When Star-Lord does a very similar space float in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, we see his body start to puff up as a response to being out there, a reaction that, according to Hadfield, is a lot more realistic than what we see here in Guardians 1. According to Hadfield, if you popped your helmet off in space, sure, your lungs would sort of collapse, but also your blood would fizz like opening a can of Coke. Release the pressure and suddenly there's bubbles in your blood and in your cheeks and in all of your flesh, and you're gonna swell up. But anyways, Yondu then pretends to threaten Peter in order to not look like a big softie in front of all of his Ravager friends. And luckily, he buys Peter enough time to sell him and the Ravagers on working together to steal the orb from Ronan, while also helping to protect Xandar. However, since Rocket has no idea this deal is going down, Rocket and Drax threaten to blow up Yondu's ship with the very same Hadron Enforcer that Rocket was working on their way to nowhere. According to Rocket, this Hadron Enforcer is powerful enough to destroy entire moons, which is why it was the right weapon to shatter Ronan's universal weapon, a weapon durable enough to handle the raw power of the Power Stone itself, which we can see Ronan do not long after this when he tells Thanos to slurp his cerulean smurf sausage. And speaking of this universal weapon wielded by all of the accusers, I have a feeling that this weapon is made out of vibranium, mostly because it's a metal that is just as energy absorbent as vibranium while also being able to produce sonic blasts. You know, just like the vibranium tech found in Shuri's arm cannons, as well as those sonic stabilizers on that vibranium train within the Great Mound that T'Challa used to kill Killmonger in Black Panther. And it's obviously the same type of vibranium sonic science behind Claw's arm. In the comics, the Kree universal weapon is also called the Cosmorod, which is what Miss Marvel would refer to it as in the Marvels as a fun little Easter egg. And this moment of Ronan handling the Power Stone with his bare hands in front of Thanos shows that Ronan is no longer your average mortal Kree, but has truly been enhanced by some type of dark Kree Exelon monk magic science in order to surpass regular mortal endurance, which is why when the Guardians are able to control the Power Stone at the very end of the movie, Ronan is like, how the hell are y'all doing that? You weenies are mortal, like, what the hell? And Peter was like, we're the Guardians of the Galaxy, bitch, and you're a blue about to dee-dabba-die in front of our eyes. And dabba-dee-dabba-die he did. But anyways, after the Ravagers agree to team up with the Guardians themselves agree to work as a team, with all of those jackasses symbolically standing in a circle. A line that was actually improvised by James Gunn's talented actor of a brother, Sean Gunn, who, on top of playing Yondu's right-hand man Kraglin, also provided the physical motion reference performance for Rocket on set. And my god, must Sean Gunn have knees of steel, because he would be crouching on Guardian sets for his brother and Marvel for the next decade, and we thank him for his service. Then, as the Guardians, Ravagers, and Nova Corps defend Xandar during Ronan's attack, we would get this incredibly cool tribute to the 1978 classic video game, Space Invaders, as the Ravager army shoots down all the Necrocraft trying to kamikaze the surface. And during those Necrocraft attacks, Peter's one-night stand Barit can be seen helping a woman to safety, which I thought was very nice. And then we get the super dope moment of all the Nova Corps ships sharing the energy of all their ships in order to make a shield to stop the Dark Aster's advance. And I love this moment because it encapsulates the overall theme of this movie, which is strength in togetherness, with sharing energy being exactly how the Guardians would end up defeating Ronan later on. And I also couldn't help but notice that this moment is reminiscent of a few elements from the very first issue of one of James Gunn's favorite robot heroes, Rom Space Knight. In that issue, we learn of Rom's people, the Galadorians, and how they would set up a special defense wall with their ships called a space sphere, and they would use their space sphere wall of ships to defend against an armada of dire wraiths, who were a race of dark alien sorcerers who controlled their ships with these weird spherical magical interfaces, just like the Exelon monks do for Ronan's ship, the Dark Aster. In order to break the Galadorian space sphere defenses, the dire wraiths would call upon their death wings, which were basically these giant dark bird creatures that lived inside of black suns. And not only does the design of these death wings sort of look like the Dark Aster ship, but these death wings living in a black sun also connect to the name of Ronan's ship as well, as a Dark Aster is a black star or a black sun. I don't know if this ROM Easter egg was intentional, of course, but at the very least, I feel like it could have subconsciously influenced James Gunn a little bit. But who knows? But since Ronan is unnecessarily yoked up thanks to the Power Stone, he would use his new cosmic power to completely destroy the majority of the Xandarian fleet, and would even manage to survive a full-on moon-destroying Hadron Enforcer blow to the chest later on, which is absolutely insane to just shrug off. But Ronan he just got it like that. Ronan don't skip chest day at the gym. But luckily, MCU MVP Rocket Raccoon is here to save the day by crashing his ship into Ronan himself, causing the Dark Aster to enter a freefall to the surface of the planet. Adult Groot, knowing that the end could be near for his friends, decides to sacrifice himself for those friends by turning his tree body into a life pod and expressing his deep love and connection to them by saying, "We are Groot." This "We are Groot" moment right here is absolutely phenomenal, not just because it's incredibly emotional, but it also shows the deep extent of Groot's love for the people that he comes in contact with, much like we saw when he gave that little Ravager girl a flower. To me, "We are Groot" exemplifies loving your neighbor as you would love yourself, and to have compassion for other people, even though you haven't known them for particularly long, because at the end of the day, we're all made out of the same stardust. And Groot shows this by releasing tiny particles of his inner light within to light the inside of the pod before the crash. Like, Groot is very much the Jesus Christ figure of this group and of this movie, you know, in the sense that he's a loving, selfless person willing to sacrifice himself for the people that he loves. And there was actually a really great shot of Groot and a bunch of aliens inside of the boot of Jemiah Bar, recreating Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper to really nail that Jesus allegory down. But James Gunn decided to delete that moment in order to preserve the flow of the film. James Gunn is also one of the few smart superhero movie directors out there that makes the incredibly wise move of having some of the movie's score already done before filming an emotionally heavy scene, just so he can play the music on set for the actors in order to amplify their performance. And because composer Tyler Bates is an absolute king of a man, him and his orchestra usually tend to make that happen for James when they work together. But anyways, while Peter distracts Ronan by challenging him to a Footloose-style dance-off, he sings "Ooh Child" by 5 Stairsteps, while Rocket fixes the Hadron Enforcer to blow up Ronan's universal weapon. And after Peter grabs that Power Stone with his hands, the energy of the stone appears to course through him, causing his body to start to crack and his mind to start to hallucinate. In this hallucination, he sees his mother on her deathbed exactly the way she looked before he left. And she's laying in front of this giant-ass star in the middle of this crowded-ass solar system of an area. A moment meant to symbolically cement Peter as the Lord of the Stars as he holds an Infinity Star core singularity in his bare hands. As the Guardians work together to share the load of that Infinity Stone, Ronan is then overloaded by that stone's power. But notice how Ronan's death looks extremely similar to that of Dar-Ben's from the Marvels, as Dar-Ben too had her skin crack after absorbing a shit ton of these raw purple energies that the quantum bands produced. This is because both Kamala and Dar-Ben's quantum bands function with a similar science to the Power Stone. Like I mentioned earlier, purple in the MCU is tied to the power of dead or dim stars. So much like Ronan was overpowered by the amplified dark star power of the Power Stone, Dar-Ben went supernova herself after absorbing the full cosmic might of 2 quantum bands combined. Way too much energy for a normal, non-celestial being to bear. However, when Dar-Ben explodes, she accidentally opens up a portal to another timeline, which is exactly what happens in the X-Men 97 Season 1 finale, when the purple energy core that was powering Bastion's asteroid exploded and created a black hole. And since the Loki show taught us that black holes are the keys to multiverse travel in the MCU, it would make sense that these purple Power Stone singularities would facilitate travel to different timelines, much like we see Kamala do in Miss Marvel Season 1 when she meets up with her ancestor Aisha in the past. But after Ronan's defeat, Peter switches out the container with the Power Stone with one of his troll dolls, with Yondu smiling at Peter's betrayal like a proud thief of a father would, rather than getting actually genuinely angry. Yondu only chases after Peter in Guardians Volume 2 because he felt pressured to by his crew, but deep down, Yondu never truly cared about the orb. Yondu only cared about being respected as head of the only Ravager family he has left. And when Peter openly disrespected him by stealing the orb job from him, Yondu had no choice but to chase him down in this Guardians movie and the next in order for him to not look soft. And I think I remember James Gunn mentioning one time that Yondu actually knew that Peter switched out the Power Stone when Peter gave him that container and told him not to open it because of what opening the orb does to people. That moment to me feels like Peter warning Yondu not to open that troll orb around his men because of how his crew might react to Yondu accepting Peter's betrayal. And Peter would end up being proven right when Taserface convinces the Ravagers to do a mutiny, partly as a result of losing out of the riches of selling the orb to another buyer. And finally, after the Guardians deliver the orb to Xandar and get their ship repaired by the Nova Corps, Star-Lord finally opens up that birthday gift his mother left for him to find Awesome Mix Volume 2, a new mix of his mother's favorite songs, including Brandy by Looking Glass, which Peter's father Ego would tell Star-Lord later on was a song that he felt was extremely relatable in regards to his relationship with Meredith, as well as his overall goals for the cosmos with his expansion. But speaking of Meredith's awesome mixes, if you look at all the songs on Awesome Mix Volume 1 of this movie, you can see how all the tracks of that album were purposely put together by James Gunn to be a commentary on Meredith's relationship with her celestial baby daddy. When Meredith met Ego, they were both hooked on a feeling of love. A love that Ego needed to power his expansion, because as we learned from Yondu in Guardians 2, love is the key to controlling the light of Ego's planet. Meredith would then go all the way with her new celestial spirit in the sky, who was Meredith's Moon Age daydream, a fitting description of Ego, who would tell the Guardians that he was no bigger than Earth's moon in the sequel. Meredith then fooled around and fell in love with a douchebag, a douche that would leave Meredith hanging with false hope rather than just say, "I'm not in love" to her, because he clearly loved his expansion more than he loved her. And even though Meredith said, "I want you back," and begged Ego to come and get his love, Ego would plant a red cherry bomb of a dark star tumor in her brain and then sought to escape their relationship. Then Meredith has baby Peter and says, "Ooh, child, things are gonna get easier when your dad comes back from outer space." To which Ego would then say, "Ain't no mountain high enough to keep me from getting to you, my celestial baby," when he selfishly sought out his son to use as a battery. Truly incredible foresight and creative planning by James Gunn. But anyways, that is it for this breakdown of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, a movie that quite literally changed my life in more ways than one. Alright, so the movie starts in the year 1980 as Meredith Quill and her douchebag of a boyfriend Ego ride along together listening to Brandy by Looking Glass, a song that Ego would tell his son Peter later on in the movie was a song all about their relationship. The car that they're riding in is colored orange and blue, much like Star-Lord's ship, the Milano, like father, like son there. Then after the two drive into the parking lot of a Dairy Queen, they head into the woods behind that restaurant in order to find one of Ego's many extensions of himself that he has planted across the cosmos, with those extensions all looking like blue and red alien flowers of sorts. This detail about Ego is super important because it shows just how much this Marvel Cinematic Universe version of Ego the Living Planet is modeled after one of Marvel's Elders of the Universe, specifically the Elder of the Universe known as the Gardener. As most of you probably already know, the Elders of the Universe in Marvel Comics are a group of beings who have been around since the early days of the cosmos itself, spending countless millennia of their existence dedicated to their specific passions. The first Elder of the Universe that we meet in the MCU was of course the Collector, who first appeared in the post-credit scene of Thor the Dark World and was the intended buyer of the orb in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, as played by the super talented Benicio del Toro. And of course, the Collector's passion was collecting all sorts of things and people, with that second part being significantly worse than the first part because kidnapping is not okay. And of course, the second most well-known Elder of the Universe in the MCU is the Grandmaster, whose main passion was naturally playing games and watching other people compete in various games and competitions. And that character was hilariously and famously played by Jeff Goldblum in the much-beloved Thor Ragnarok. However, these are just 2 members of the Elders of the Universe. There are other Elders like the Runner, whose passion is running, the Astronomer, who has a diehard passion for astronomy, the Obliterator, who loves to obliterate people in the same vein as like the Terminator, the Trader, who loves bartering, and most importantly, the Gardener, who has spent his super long life gardening throughout the cosmos. The human form of Ego the Living Planet in the MCU is clearly modeled after the Gardener from the Marvel Comics, and is actually an amalgamation of both the Gardener and the original comic book Ego the Living Planet, with comic book Ego actually being another member of the comic book Elders of the Universe group. And the comic book Elders of the Universe even met together on Ego's planet one time to plan their nefarious schemes. I mean, when you see Kurt Russell's Ego placed next to a picture of the original Gardener from the Marvel Comics, you'll begin to see the obvious similarities between those 2 characters. So technically, so far in the MCU, as of the year 2024, there are 3 main Elders of the Universe at play, with more likely on the way. Though I am not exactly sure if the High Evolutionary and Galactus count as Elders of the Universe, even though they should, but I personally do not know how old the High Evolutionary is. But I know that motherfucker is really old, so he should be in that group. But anyways, this plant that Ego has planted behind this Dairy Queen is of course not your ordinary plant, but a cosmic tumor that Ego had planted on Earth with the hopes of absorbing all of the energy that the planet had to offer into himself, much like Ego absorbed all of the energy out of Meredith into himself when he killed her in 1988. But not only this, but it's also a cosmic tumor that is specifically powered by the power of love and the heart. And we can see this exemplified at the very start of the movie when Ego's plant starts to grow as a result of Ego's genuine love for Meredith, with the camera even zooming into the Ego tumor itself to show us how Ego's blue energy is reacting to his kiss to Meredith. The stronger Ego's love for Meredith is, the stronger his blue energy glows. And the stronger Ego's blue energy glows, the more Ego expands and grows. And this detail is crucial because I believe it helps explain a key MCU concept regarding how chaos energy, or chaos magic if you will, works in the MCU. Chaos energy is an extremely emotionally reactive energy in this universe, and it's an energy that both of Peter Quill's blue and red fathers rely heavily on for their powers. Like for example, in order for Yondu's Yaka arrow to take flight, Yondu has to put his whole heart into his whistling, because that is what activates the red chaos energy inside of the Yaka metal to move that arrow around in space. And it's the same energy science behind Wanda Maximoff's entire career as the Scarlet Witch, because the more emotionally reactive Wanda Maximoff became, the stronger her chaos powers reacted, which is why the Westview Hex was created as a response to Wanda's deep anguish. But anyways, the movie then transitions to 34 years later to the year 2014, where it's only been a few short months since the events of the first movie, and over the course of that time, the Guardians have become famously benevolent mercenaries for hire after their takedown of Ronan the Accuser and their use of an Infinity Stone without dying made them instant galactic celebrities pretty much overnight. When we first meet the Guardians in this movie, we see them on the homeworld of the Sovereign, whose homeworld looks incredibly freaking weird, don't you think? Like, what the hell's going on here? Like, what is the purpose of all of these planet-sized spheres making up their homeworld when planets are usually made up of like a singular spherical celestial body? Well, I have theorized for years now that this Sovereign homeworld ain't your grandma and grandpa's homeworld, but instead are a series of 6 artificially made spherical structures called Dyson spheres made to harness the powers of 6 separate stars. And for those of you who don't know, Dyson spheres are a completely theoretical device that some extremely creative scientists have posited could be used to act as a sort of shell covering the entirety of a star in order to thoroughly capture that star's energy to give mankind a nearly infinite power source of virtually limitless potential. This being said, it seems like the Sovereign have utilized the limitless potential of such structures to help their high-tech society flourish, using these spheres to farm the energy for their ultra-powerful, rare, and highly combustible Annulax batteries, which is why when we zoom in on the Guardians on this platform, we can see 6 Annulax battery generators on the platform, 1 for each Sovereign star. But this special golden Annulax energy isn't just used to power the golden Sovereign racist society. The Sovereign also routinely use this energy to evolve the future members of their own race as well, concentrating all of that stellar Annulax evolution energy into special birthing pods in order for their progeny to be even more evolutionarily exceptional than the previous generation. And we actually saw this same science applied in the MCU's other big movie about Celestials, the Eternals movie from 2021. Because much like we see the Sovereign charging up their Anulax batteries using the golden power of suns in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, the Celestials did the same thing with their favorite robot energy sponges in the Eternals, with that movie opening up with the Eternals waking up in front of Earth's sun after spending God knows how long charging up their divinely robotic bodies up with all of that yellow golden energy. And since the bodies of these Eternals were filled with this extremely potent solar evolution energy, the deviant Crow was able to suck the sunny delight out of all of the Eternals in order to evolve his body and mind, just like Aisha would use the solar energy from her sons in order to create the most evolved Sovereign ever to exist, Adam Warlock. This all being said, and much like I've brought up in my breakdowns of both the first Guardians, the third Guardians, and the first X-Men movie, solar energy in the MCU is strongly tied to the concept of evolution. And this concept is important to understand because it can also help us understand exactly why Ego the Living Planet needed both Meredith and Peter Quill in the first place. They were both the children of Earth's golden yellow star, and Ego wanted that powerful golden light within them for himself to help him achieve his own goals, because Ego did not have access to that specific brand of light star power himself. Because Ego is a dark celestial, the only type of energy Ego has access to was a special type of energy called dark energy. And it's the same type of energy found within the Tesseract, as well as 68% of all of space in the universe, both in the MCU and in our real-life universe. Most of the universe is this invisible dark energy, and scientists have theorized that dark energy is responsible for the very constant expansion of our universe every single second. And because of this, if humanity were to somehow find a way to convert this invisible dark energy all around us into actual usable energy, then we would be able to unlock an infinite source of cosmic energy. And this is why Nick Fury and the secret Hydra nerds at S.H.I.E.L.D. were so damn obsessed with unlocking the power of the Tesseract at the Dark Energy Mission Facility at the very beginning of Avengers 1. Because if America could just find a way to weaponize all of that limitless energy, then they could be well on their way to becoming a crazy advanced nation with virtually unrivaled power. But little did America and the rest of the world know that Wakanda had already beat them to the punch a long-ass time ago when a giant dark energy meteor crashed into Africa. This being the case, dark energy is the very sea of space itself, with all the planets and stars of the cosmos swimming in this sea of dark energy, which is why dark energy is associated with the Space Stone. This is the significance of the song Brandy by Looking Glass in this movie when it comes to Ego and Meredith's relationship, as that song is about a sailor choosing the sea over a life with a woman that he met and fell in love with. Because Ego was literally blue dark energy made sentient, like he was straight up a giant blue dark energy brain. And because dark energy's main purpose in science is to expand the universe, Ego's main purpose in life was to expand himself with his expansion. Like, he was straight up merely acting in his nature. But anyways, don't worry, I'm not going to go into another big old rant about how all the energies of the MCU tie into science this time around, but if you do want that super in-depth explanation, definitely head on over to my breakdown of the first Guardians movie that you can find here on Heavy Spoilers. I'm just trying to get you guys to recognize what it means to be a dark celestial in the MCU. It's the opposite of a light celestial like we saw in Eternals. To be a dark celestial, you gotta be powered by invisible energies, or dark energies. It's only called dark because there's an absence of light there. And in Ego's case, when you look directly at his brain, you can see that he's made of blue dark energy as well as a dash of red chaos energy. 2 out of the 3 infinity energy singularities in the MCU associated with the absence of light energy, with that third energy being the purple power singularity. But while Ego's dark energy powers are indeed immensely powerful and grant him an extremely long life, like blue dark energy did for MCU characters like Namor and the people of Talokan, Aisha and the Clandestines, King the Conqueror, and Wenwu, dark energy is even stronger when combined with the golden solar light energy that lives within every human being who has had ancestors bathing under Earth's golden sun for generations. It was this yellow quantum energy that this dark celestial needed from both Meredith and Peter, and he used his own extremely toxic version of love to try to get that energy, with Ego ultimately resolving to put a tumor in Meredith Quill's brain in order to keep her deliriously in love with him while simultaneously hijacking her nervous system and siphoning all of that yellow mind energy light from her body until she died. So basically, Meredith literally loved Ego to death, with Ego merely using his former flame as a mini solar flame to power his expansion until he could create another godlike being that could act as a more permanent replacement battery. We actually get a little look of what Peter Quill's inner solar quantum energy power looks like at the very end of Guardians 1, when the Nova Corps is telling Peter about his unique biology. And I believe this inner solar flame would ultimately find its way onto the uniforms of the Guardians of the Galaxy themselves by Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, with Star-Lord placing a yellow-golden flame at the center of the Guardians' blue and red uniforms, with all three of these colors pointing to his parents, blue and red for Ego and Yondu, and yellow for Meredith. But anyways, this all being said, this is kind of why I believe James Gunn started off this movie with the Guardians protecting solar batteries from a hungry, tentacled cosmic interloper, because it symbolically sets the tone for what Ego would end up trying to do with his living celestial battery of a son, Peter Quill. But anyways, when you look at these Anulax battery generators on this platform here, they appear to function a lot like the golden Asgardian force field generators that we saw utilized during Malekith's siege on the light gods of Asgard in Thor the Dark World, as well as the inner workings of Kang's golden yellow multiversal engine core that was the main focus of Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, with all of these yellow energy generating devices of course being associated with solar yellow mind stone energy, or more properly known as quantum energy. But anyways, after the Guardians bicker with one another about songs and sensitive nipples, in comes a big ass terrifying creature known as an Obelisk in the MCU. This Obelisk creature, as well as those found in the High Evolutionary's possession in Guardians 3, all appear to be strongly modeled after the extra-dimensional Great Old Ones from Marvel Comics, also known as the Many-Angled Ones, though I can't necessarily give Marvel full credit for creating these guys, as these Great Old Ones were technically originally created by author H.P. Lovecraft in the 1926 short story The Call of Cthulhu. But in Marvel continuity, these Great Old Ones were extra-dimensional creatures that were basically regarded as these primordial beings of destruction capable of possessing the bodies of living beings. However, since Kevin Feige has gone on record as saying that the Cancerverse is not a thing in MCU continuity, with the Cancerverse famously being the universe that the Great Old Ones colonized during a major Marvel Comics event, the only thing that these Obelisks have in common with these Great Old Ones from the comics is that they come from a space outside of 616 in between universes. And I have a feeling that these Obelisk creatures are related to the mysterious tentacled creature that Red Skull called the Champion of Hydra in the first Captain Carter episode of What If back in Season 1, as that creature seemed to have also emerged from some type of space between universes. But at any rate, when the Obelisk attacks the Guardians, check out how this squid motherfucker burps out some rainbow gas. Like, this ain't because this weird looking mother dang ate some Skittles for breakfast, okay? It's because these creatures appear to exclusively feed on energy, specifically the 6 infinity energies that pervade every universe in the Marvel Cinematic Multiverse. These creatures seem addicted to the stuff, so much so that they look for any cracks in reality to let them into a universe so they can feed off of powerful sources of infinity energy. Which also begs the question, how in the hell did an interdimensional crack in reality form around this sovereign homeworld? And how the hell did the Sovereign know so far in advance that one was going to form at that specific place and time in the first place? I mean, yeah, we do see Star-Lord using a modded version of his old Mattel classic football game to be able to track the Obelisk's arrival in 616, but that still doesn't answer how the Sovereign knew to defend their batteries from an interdimensional invader. If I had to guess, the answer likely has to do with the large unnatural gathering of stars that the Sovereign appear to live on with their Dyson spheres. Due to the sheer mass of these stars, wild gravitational distortions appear to be happening around the Sovereign, causing super odd tears in time to happen. And not only is this evidenced by the regular arrival of Obelisk creatures to feast on all that harvested stellar energy, but it also might serve to explain why there's a giant quantum asteroid field not far from the Sovereign, with each of these asteroids appearing to disappear and pop up over and over again as they appear to shift through different positions in space-time. So basically, it seems to me that, instead of stopping their unnatural solar farming, these Sovereigns simply elect to hire whatever mercenaries they can find to exterminate Obelisks as they pop up through various gravitational anomalies of their own doing. But anyways, as the Guardians take care of the Obelisk, Baby Groot dances to Mr. Blue Sky by the Electric Light Orchestra, with Mr. Blue Sky being a slight nod towards the coming of Ego the Living Planet, a celestial being who uses the blue dark energy that pervades the sky and space as his main power source. source. Ego is literally Mr. Blue Sky. And also, fun fact, director James Gunn actually did the mocap for this dance sequence. And you can really tell because this baby tree is tearing it up, man. But anyways, after the fight, when the Guardians are getting ready to meet up with Aisha, we get our first hints towards Rocket's common history with the Sovereign people when we see Rocket pick up one of the Anulax batteries to examine them, likely noticing the handiwork of the High Evolutionary all over those dang batteries. A realization that, I believe, was his main motivation for stealing the batteries from the Sovereign in the first place. I mean, if you rewatch Rocket's torturous evolution from a normal raccoon to an intelligent cyborg in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, you'll notice that the High Evolutionary and his assistants appear to use a strange golden liquid on Rocket to facilitate his evolution. And it's a liquid that can also be found within the cages of the High Evolutionary's mutated star children when the Guardians discover them later on in the film. I talk about all of this in my Guardians 3 breakdown, by the way, so if you want to check that out, feel free to hit up the Heavy Spoilers channel. In his quest to evolve as much life as he could, it appears that the High Evolutionary has discovered a way to synthesize the evolutionary power of solar quantum energy to aid in the evolution of beings like Batch 89, the Star Children, and the Sovereign. So since this golden stuff was at the center of Rocket's trauma and evolution, he was able to recognize what these Harbulary batteries were right from the jump, and even knew that they were powerful enough to destroy Ego later on in the movie. Then the Guardians enter the Sovereign throne room to meet up with the High Priestess Aisha, as played by the talented and beautiful Elizabeth Debicki. And one of the reasons why she got this role is because she was so damn tall, standing at a whopping 6'2". But to make her look even taller, they made her wear platform shoes that made her height increase to 6'7". 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot bunch. Aisha then tells the Guardians how all the members of the Sovereign race are meticulously crafted with birthing pods, with an early prototype of a Sovereign birthing pod being seen amongst the Collector's Collection in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. These birthing pods are of course modeled after the birthing pod that Adam Warlock was born in the Marvel Comics when he was first introduced in the pages of Fantastic Four 67. In the comics, both Adam Warlock and Aisha were created by this group of overly ambitious asshole scientists called the Enclave in their quest to genetically engineer a perfect being that would help them rule the world as they saw fit. However, after Adam Warlock went rogue, they decided to try their hand at making another perfect being through the creation of Aisha in Incredible Hulk Annual number 6 from 1977. Aisha would initially be born as a man named Paragon, until Paragon made a second birthing pod cocoon for himself to finish his metamorphosis into the powerful female being Aisha in the pages of Marvel 2-in-1 from 1979. When Aisha was born, she was merely known as her, just like Adam Warlock was originally known as him, before adopting the name of Adam Warlock. But unlike the mother-son relationship that Aisha and Adam have in the MCU, the comic book Aisha initially sought out Adam Warlock to become a mate for her in order for the both of them to create an entirely new species of perfect golden people. Comic book Aisha was a million times kinder than the Aisha of the MCU, who, along with the rest of her race, have clearly let their perfect genetics go to their heads. But while the Guardians are meeting with Aisha in this scene, notice how Aisha tells Star-Lord that she senses his unique genealogy just by looking at him, implying that Aisha's eyes may have evolved in such a way to be able to detect genetic abnormalities within people with just her eyeballs, which is kind of insane. And because of this, she even proposes that the both of them do the deed so that they could possibly create a new breed of Sovereign Celestial hybrid, something that Peter refuses in order to stay in Gamora's good graces. However, this refusal, combined with Aisha's anger at the Guardians later on in the movie, may have actually inspired Aisha to make Adam Warlock in the first place, as she probably viewed Star-Lord as too powerful to defeat as the son of a Celestial. So she decided to spend the next decade making sure that she could create a perfect weapon to defeat the Guardians later. But anyways, when Gamora interrupts Aisha's attempt to have Peter turn her into a Jackson Pollock painting, she asks Aisha to give them Nebula as their prize, with Gamora referring to her sister Nebula as an it when she does so, showing the massive rift between the sisters after Nebula's participation in the devastating Battle of Xandar. And after picking up Nebula, Alyota Haynes Jeremiah's Lakeshore Drive plays as the Guardians leave the planet, with that song being director James Gunn's favorite song on the entire Awesome Mix Volume 2 album, because he and his brother Sean Gunn used to listen to that song all the time growing up. And while on the ship, we get our first really good look at Star-Lord's t-shirt, a shirt written entirely in the Xandarian language, and when translated it says the words "Gears Shift" in big letters on the front, with the words "A Tanaic Galaxy Invention" written directly underneath that, a reference to costume designer Karen Tenayuk, who made the design of the shirt. On the top right of the design, you can see a molecular structure with the words dust, cement, stone, and ash written around it. However, unfortunately for the Guardians, not long after they leave the planet, they're chased by the Sovereign for Rocket's theft of their batteries, leading Peter and Rocket to bicker about who's the better pilot overall. Rocket reminds Peter that he was cybernetically engineered to pilot a spacecraft, another nod to Rocket's creator, the High Evolutionary, and his torturous past as the High Evolutionary's tool. And during their battle, the back of their ship is torn off, leading the Guardians to use a yellow force field shield to keep them all from flying out of the ship, with similar force field shielding being found in the prisons of Asgard in Thor: The Dark World. And when Drax decides to take a quick pop outside to give the Sovereign Army a piece of his mind, he throws on one of the holographic spacesuits that the Guardians have on their ship and heads out there, with the holographic spacesuit projecting a force field of dark energy around his body to protect him, with Rocket Raccoon later working with Tony Stark to implement that similar type of force field shielding on the visors of the Avengers in Avengers Endgame. And since those Endgame suits were entirely made up of vibranium nanotechnology that Tony received from Wakanda, it makes sense that this is the same force field science that Wakanda also uses to project a force field around their entire nation. Dark energy is fantastic for shielding in the MCU, man, which is why Hydra used the dark energy from the Tesseract to protect their base at the very beginning of Avengers Age of Ultron, and Kang used dark energy to protect himself in Quantumania before a big-headed abomination decided to burst his bubble. Speaking of dark energy, right before the Guardians are about to be eviscerated by the Sovereign after failing to evade their army, in comes the dark energy god himself, Ego, to save the day, sending massive lightning bolts of energy at the Sovereign fleet, the same type of dark energy lightning that the Asgardian Thor has mastery over. It's all the same shit, to be honest, which is why Thor's lightning was able to power up Tony's new Tesseract element suit in the first Avengers movie. As the Guardians use a jump gate to enter the orbit of the planet Bearheart, Gamora uses her enhanced cybernetic augmentations to keep Drax from flying away, while Baby Groot sits there like a good boy, munching on some space Skittles. The planet Bearheart was first introduced in the pages of the Incredible Hulk 111 from 1968 as the homeworld of the alien race known as the Sagittarians, and it's a planet where the Hulk faced off against the evil cosmic entity known as the Galaxy Master, who referred to himself as the Supreme Space Lord, something I found particularly interesting considering that the Nova Corps database would refer to Star-Lord as Space Lord on his rap sheet in Guardians 1. And when the Guardians crash land on Bearheart, 3 cute-ass alien birds can be seen chilling on a branch, with these little guys being original creations for the movie called the Vailu. And not long after their crash landing, the Guardians are of course confronted by their savior Ego, who immediately tells the group that he's Peter's father and that Peter should be able to tell by his rugged good looks. However, what's particularly interesting about this detail is that we would learn later on that Ego specifically modeled his appearance after Peter Quill's love for cinematic legend Zardu Hasselfrau of House Hasselfrau, first of his name. So this begs the question, how the hell did Ego know to model himself to the form that most suited Peter Quill when he had never met this kid in his damn life? This is where I believe Meredith's tumor comes in. Because Ego had a direct line into Meredith Quill's brain and her nervous system as a whole, Ego was able to see what Meredith Quill saw and knew the full contents of Meredith Quill's mind. And through that tumor, he was able to see how much Peter Quill looked up to Zardu Hasselfrau's work in the beloved 1982 action series Knight Rider, and how much Peter desperately wanted to know his father, and use that information to try to manipulate Peter to his side in this movie. Gamora of course brings this up while hilariously mispronouncing David Hasselhoff's name. However, Star-Lord loving a show about a talking car is actually quite fitting for the overall Star-Lord legacy, as the original Star-Lord from the comics that made his debut in 1975's Marvel Preview number 4 had a talking ship simply called Ship that made its debut in 1977's Marvel Preview number 11. Then the scene transitions to the icy cold planet of Contraxia, with that planet appearing in the comics for the first time in 1983's Jack of Hearts number 2. But in the MCU, this planet is a safe space where pirates and other mustard-colored robot lovers like Howard the Duck go to get laid at the local brothel called the Iron Lotus. And here we find Yondu and the gang partaking in all sorts of unchristian-like debaucheries, with the robot courtesans there known as the Lovebots, with the design of those Lovebots borrowed heavily from the artistic styles of Hajime Sorayama. After Yondu gets his freak on with some of the Lovebots himself, you can see a picture of a walrus on the wall, with that picture being a direct reference to comic book Rocket Raccoon's best friend, Walrus, who made his first appearance in The Incredible Hulk 271 alongside Rocket Raccoon. This picture is actually ripped directly from a comic book panel, specifically the third page and second panel of 1985's Rocket Raccoon #2. Walrus would of course be the inspiration for the character Teefs introduced with Batch 89 in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Then Yondu was surprised by the arrival of Stakaro Gord and his faction of Ravagers, a group that has disavowed Yondu's faction of Ravagers after they discovered that Yondu was trafficking children around the galaxy for Ego. Later on in the movie, while Yondu and Rocket are having their big heart-to-heart moment in the orbit of Ego's planet, we learn that as a young boy, Yondu was sold by his own parents into slavery. So I find it interesting how Yondu is manifesting the trauma that was done to him by trafficking alien children himself in the past. I mean, you know what they say, hurt people, man, and that's kind of what this movie is all about. How hurt people like Yondu and Rocket tend to lash out and hurt others as a learned response to unaddressed trauma, and that's why Yondu is able to see Rocket for who he truly is and relate to him deeply in this movie. But anyways, Stakaro Gord is of course played by cinematic legend Sylvester Stallone, and alongside him is his right-hand guy, Martin X. Tanaga, as played by comic book media legend Michael Rosenbaum, who many people know as Lex Luthor from the CW Smallville, as well as Wally West in the Justice League animated series. And like many of you guys already know, both Stakaro Gord and Martin X. Tanaga in the comics were part of the original Guardians of the Galaxy team, a team that made their debut in 1968's Marvel Superheroes 18, with the original roster consisting of Yondu Udonta, Major Vance Astro, Charlie 27, and Martin X. Comic book Stakaro Gord would not be introduced as the superpowered hero Starhawk until around 7 years later in the pages of Defenders number 27. Among comic book Starhawk's power set is the ability to generate hard light constructs and manipulate light in general, which is what those two glowing straps of yellow golden energy allow him to do. But we of course will not get to see Stakar and his full Starhawk glory until he shows up in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 alongside Endgame Gamora and his band of Ravagers. But anyways, after Stakar and Yondu have their bitter confrontation, in comes Queen Bitterness herself, with the Sovereign offering Yondu a job to track down and capture the Guardians. But little do they know, Peter, Drax, and Gamora have left the planet of Bearheart entirely on Ego's weird-looking spaceship, while The Chain by Fleetwood Mac plays in the background, leaving only Rocket, Groot, and Nebula to be found by the Ravagers later on, courtesy of a tracker that Yondu placed on their ship at the end of the first movie. As the music plays, however, we can see a really dope piece of symbolic set design when Mantis uses her powers to help her father Ego sleep, with Ego's bed area being carved in the shape of a brain to foreshadow that Ego himself is nothing but a giant celestial brain at the core of his makeshift planet. And as Ego's ship enters warp speed to get all of them to Ego's planet as soon as possible, Mantis explains how she has the ability to manipulate emotions as part of her power set, something that is unique to the MCU, much like her entire origin as the daughter of Ego the Living Planet. Despite Mantis having been introduced as a human being in the pages of 1973's Avengers 112, director James Gunn decided to make Mantis an alien in this movie just so that Star-Lord could remain the only sole guardian from Earth. Mantis is of course played by actress Pom Klementif and was chosen after an extremely meticulous audition process, with hundreds of actresses apparently vying for the role. Meanwhile, back at Bearheart, Rocket jams out to Southern Nights by Glenn Campbell as he kicks the asses of Yondu's faction of Ravagers. But after Yondu shows up with his Yaka arrow, Rocket's fun ends pretty damn quickly. However, unfortunately for Yondu, when he announces his plans to take the batteries instead of the Guardians, that doesn't go well with the rest of his men, with the Ravager Taserface deciding to take the opportunity to stage a mutiny on their soft-ass leader. Making his debut in the first issue of 1990's Guardians of the Galaxy comic, Taserface was originally a part of a race of purple-ass aliens called the Stark, who were named that because of Tony Stark himself. In the alternate universe of Earth 691, Iron Man decided it was a great idea to launch a bunch of his Stark technology into space rather than risk that technology falling into the hands of the Martians who were invading Earth at that time. That technology would eventually find its way to an alien planet where that planet's primitive species would use Stark's technology to rapidly evolve their society, naming themselves the Stark because of how instrumental that technology was for their people, with the Starks all wearing Iron Man suits as part of their culture. However, much like Taserface in this movie, the Stark are kind of major assholes, and because of that, they would become enemies of the original Guardians of the Galaxy team. Comic book Taserface was a cyborg scout for his people who was among those tasked to stop the Guardians. But when he failed, however, the Stark would eventually torture him before giving him new high-tech cybernetic upgrades to try again, while also giving him the new name Overkill. But eventually, Overkill/Taserface would die in an explosion of his own in the pages of Guardians of the Galaxy 48. So both versions of Taserface both shared a similar taser fate. But anyways, as the Guardians arrive on Ego's planet, 1970's My Sweet Lord by George Harrison plays in the background. And not long after this, Ego then goes on to tell Gamora, Peter, and Drax that he's a member of the celestial race of lowercase g gods. But unlike most Celestials, Ego was special because he straight up had zero recollection of where he came from, or how his brainy-ass self came to be. However, Ego's origin is detailed in the Marvel Comics, specifically in the pages of 1974's Thor 228, about 8 years after Ego was introduced in Thor 132 in the year 1966. In Thor 228, we learn that Ego was originally a scientist by the name of Egros. Because the sun that neighbored Egros' planet was set to go supernova, Egros spent that planet's last few days trying to figure out a way to save his people, and Egros would eventually resolve to try to preserve all the people of his planet by having them hide in a special bunker in the planet's core. However, when the sun exploded way ahead of schedule, Egros did not get a chance to reach those underground bunkers in time, leading the resulting supernova to cause every living being on the dying planet to somehow become one with Egros himself, reshaping Egros into the entity known as Ego the Living Planet. This Marvel Comics origin story very much lines up with the conditions to create a celestial being in the MCU, much like we learned in 2021's Eternals. In that movie, Arishem revealed that Celestials were born as a result of the combined golden mind singularity energies from every single human being that has ever lived, with all that yellow quantum energy being used to feed the celestial seed that would eventually become the golden celestial Tiamat. So basically in the comics, Egros himself basically acted as the celestial seed that absorbed all of the energies of his people into himself, elevating himself into a higher type of life form. So even though it seems evident that the origins of Ego in the MCU are drastically different than the origins of Ego in the comics, given the fictional science that Kevin Feige and Marvel have made for the origins of the Celestials in Eternals, it only made sense for Ego's comic origins to inspire Marvel to classify him as a Celestial in MCU 616. But speaking of Ego, ever since James Gunn was working on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, the intention was always for Ego to eventually be revealed as Peter's father. However, some folks at Marvel Studios would eventually find out that the rights of Ego the Living Planet actually belonged to 20th Century Fox at the time, so Marvel was in a bit of a pickle. But luckily, a deal between Marvel Studios and Fox was reached that allowed Marvel Studios to have the full rights to Ego in exchange for the rights to alter the power set of Negasonic Teenage Warhead for the first Deadpool movie. So you can thank everyone's favorite Merc with a mouth for allowing Guardians 2 to happen. Another win from Marvel Jesus. But anyways, as the Guardians walk through the doors of Ego's castle, check out the design of the doors themselves, as I believe you can see the design of Ego's blue and red cancerous plants repeated along the sides of each of those doors, which I thought was an incredibly nice subtle design detail. And during Ego's presentation to the Guardians about his origins, he mentions how after he spent millions of years trying to form a planet around his brain, he had a strong urge to find life, which makes sense considering that Arishem's band of Celestials all naturally possessed a strong affinity for life themselves. But unfortunately, Ego would also adopt the Celestials' innate drive to place celestial seeds throughout all the planets with sentient life across the cosmos. But instead of planting seeds to make new celestial life, Ego merely planted seeds of his own damn self in order to increase his own damn power, especially after he became so disappointed at how insignificant all the little sentient lives around him were. And to that end, not only did Ego plant seeds in planets, but he would also go around planting his tumor seeds in people, which is partly why Drax quite intelligently asked Ego if he was smuggling some celestial testicles in those pants. However, I do not think it was only Ego's sexual intimacy with Meredith that acted as the celestial seed for the birth of his son Peter, but mostly the celestial tumor that Ego placed within Meredith's head itself, with Ego planting yet another seed within Meredith's head so that the cosmic blue dark energies of Ego could graft Ego's celestial nature onto Peter's DNA, which is why I believe when Ego shows a baby Peter in Meredith's womb, Meredith's stomach glows blue to show the tumor's influence on Peter's development. This would serve to explain why Ego felt like he had to put a tumor within Meredith's head in the first place. Not because he was purposely being cruel, but because planting a celestial seed within an energy-rich place was the only way to create another celestial being. And there's no place more energy-rich in the human body than the human brain, the hub of energy in the human body that connects to the entire human nervous system. The way I see it, Ego's tumor both fed blue-dark energy into Meredith's pregnant body while simultaneously sucking out the golden mind singularity energies out of Meredith that would have otherwise gone to Tiamat if her body got to naturally decompose that energy inside of the earth. So basically, Ego was giving her blue energy while taking out her yellow energy. This would also serve to explain why Peter was the only one amongst Ego's children that was able to connect with Ego's blue brain light at the center of his planet. Because like I mentioned before, love is what causes Ego's tumors to grow. And Meredith seems to be the only woman that Ego met throughout the entire cosmos that he genuinely felt a strong affection for. I mean, yes, this dude was clearly a selfish sociopath in the end, who clearly developed an extremely toxic form of love. No one's denying that. But that doesn't mean that he didn't feel genuine, strong feelings of love for Meredith while he was with her. I mean, dude did visit Meredith multiple times after he initially left the planet because he could not keep himself away from her. That, in my opinion, was the defining factor that gave Peter Quill the celestial heritage in his DNA. Ego and Meredith's strong mutual love for each other. Like all those other alien women that Ego coupled with were just booty calls to him. Meredith was the only woman that he felt something with. This all being said, now that we know that Mantis is also one of Ego's children, as of the insanely wholesome events of the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, I am genuinely curious as to what Ego's relationship was with Mantis's birth mother, as Mantis herself appears to have been granted some superpowers as a result of her own celestial heritage, even if she didn't have the exact connection to Ego's brain that Ego was looking for. But speaking of Mantis's birth mother, later when Ego is revealing how much of a cosmic fuckboy he's been by showing Peter all the women that he's slept with, the top left of that group of women appears to have an alien woman that looks like a member of Mantis's mysterious alien race, implying that this woman was indeed Mantis's mother. But anyways, after Peter gets this lore dump from Ego, he soon quickly channels the dark energy light within Ego's planet by focusing on his love for his mother, and uses that light to play a fun game of catch with his dad and bond with him. Meanwhile, while all this is happening, things aren't going great with Peter's other dad, as Taserface and the boys lock both Yondu and Rocket on their ship, with their only hope of escape being the adorably dumb Groot. And while Groot goes to retrieve Yondu's prototype fin, after hilariously failing more than once at the expense of a poor man's toe, he finally finds the fin in Yondu's drawer, next to a small container written in an alien language. This language is actually the Skrull alphabet, and the writing at the top actually translates to the word candy, revealing that this is a container of candy, and on the side of the container are the words fun to eat. And of course this fin is a lot more comics accurate than the fin that Yondu had in the first movie, with James Gunn including the prototype fin in Guardians 2 to satiate fans who were upset at how small Yondu's fin looked in the first movie. But like I mentioned in my breakdown of the first movie, James Gunn only gave Michael Rooker a smaller fin in that movie to prevent a somewhat clumsy Rooker from having that fin distract his acting performance. But after Yondu gets his fin back on his head, he gets his retribution in style as Come a Little Bit Closer by Jay and the Americans plays, with Yondu's Yaka Arrow massacre ending with the destruction of Yondu's ship the Eclector, blowing Taserface all across Taser space. And before Rocket, Kraglin, Groot, and Yondu warp all across Taser space themselves, you can see Rocket scrolling through a number of planets on Yondu's nav computer, including Hala, Terra, Dreslar, and Terma. Hala is of course the name of the Kree homeworld that was a focal point of 2023's The Marvels, and we already know that Terra is the alien name for Earth. Dreslar was a planet first introduced in 2007's Nova number 4 as a Kree colony planet that was devastated by the Annihilation Wave. And it's also the planet where the Kree warrior Kor-El was briefly given the powers of Nova by the Xandarian World Mine. And in the same year, the planet Terma was introduced in Annihilation Conquest #1, and it was a random Kree outworld that the heroes Phyla-Vell and Moondragon discovered Adam Warlock on. Then, as Rocket impatiently sends the group from jump point to jump point across the cosmos, the first planet that they fly over is actually the planet Rhea, homeworld of the Kronan alien species where Thor's rock buddy Korg hails from. Then soon after this, we see their faces all warp and contort as a result of Rocket making them do 700 jumps in succession, with that moment being a direct reference to Marvel Presents issue number 6 from 1975, when the original Guardians had their faces warped in space as well. And during this crazy journey, the group would famously fly over Stan Lee, talking to 3 members of the Watcher's race on a desolate planet, with Stan Lee being revealed in this movie as an informant for the Watchers the entire time he's been making cameos in the MCU. And while giving them the down low on his adventures, he brings up the time that he was a Federal Express man, referencing his cameo towards the end of Captain America Civil War when he hilariously calls Iron Man Tony Stank, a name that Stan Lee should have given to Elon Musk instead. And back on Ego's planet, Peter and Gamora argue about whether or not Ego is too good to be true. But when they do, check out the design of Ego's lamps, purposely designed after Earth's sun to point to how Ego treasures the evolving power of solar quantum mind energy that resides within all human beings, because that power helps power his expansion. Ego's entire castle appears to be themed gold and blue, not only to show Ego's connection with Meredith, but also to show the 2 main energies that powers Ego's expansion and would begin to evolve him into a god of a universal scale. Because if you think about it, at the end of the day, Ego's main goal was kind of to become like Dormammu from Doctor Strange 1, a cosmic being that became obsessed with feeding off of the energies of living beings for the purpose of becoming one with everything. This is because Ego's primary objective in Guardians 2 was to become the only being in cosmic existence, not only in the 616 universe, but in the entire multiverse, much like Dormammu's goal in the first Doctor Strange movie. Ego wanted to become the cosmic entity Eternity himself by taking over every single planet and star that made up Eternity's impossibly infinite body. This is the reason why I believe Ego shows Star-Lord Eternity when he touches Star-Lord's head and puts him under his trance, because he was trying to show Peter exactly what he was after. Because Ego the Living Planet is nothing but a cancerous growth within Eternity's infinitely vast being, a living tumor who wanted to grow and grow and grow throughout Eternity's being until there was nothing of Eternity left but Ego. Because that's kind of how tumors function in the actual human body, and the Guardians of the Galaxy were cosmically meant to act as Eternity's white blood cells in a way to get rid of the cancer that was Ego once and for all in that timeline. And in a similar vein to both Ego and Dormammu, Kang the Conqueror from Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania also shared that same goal, with Quantumania Kang even vocally declaring that he would conquer Eternity to his army. But anyways, after Peter and Gamora's disagreement, Gamora hangs out by herself in a field before getting the surprise arrival of a vengeful Nebula, with the subsequent chase sequence and battle taking inspiration from Mad Magazine's Spy vs. Spy, as well as North by Northwest by Alfred Hitchcock. But after the two kick and make up, they discover the skeletons of Ego's dead children at the exact moment that Ego would go on to tell his son the truth about his expansion, eventually telling a mind-controlled Peter that he was the one who gave his mother terminal brain cancer. This revelation triggers Peter's love for his mother, which subsequently allows Peter to break free of Ego's control to put a bunch of holes into that stupid hoe, causing said stupid hoe to get mad and transform into David Hasselhoff himself to show Peter how hard he was trying to relate to him before being forced to shove one of his tentacles into Peter to use him as a battery. Thank God this isn't a hentai, because that tentacle shit would go a lot differently. Unfortunately for Ego, however, in comes Peter's real dad, Yondu, crashing into Ego's castle while calling him a jackass, much like Yondu did at the very end of the first Guardians film. This ship that Yondu, Rocket, and Baby Groot are in is actually an old laser drill that Yondu stole from the Collector a long-ass time ago to help him break into a bank on the planet Ascavaria. But what's super interesting about this laser drill is how it is also covered in the alphabet of a super ancient race of alien beings known as the Builders. In the Marvel Comics, the Builders were regarded as the first race of living beings who spent the entire lifetime of the universe creating civilizations and manipulating how those civilizations evolved. I actually made a super in-depth video about this 5 years back on my own channel that you can check out here, but considering that the Collector and all the Elders of the Universe all have their origins tied to the very beginning of the universe itself, much like these builders, it kind of makes me wonder exactly what relationship the Collector and these MCU builders had in the past, and if these builders will be coming into the MCU as a big bad in the future. Because if you know anything about the builder conflict from the Marvel Comics, then you already know that shit goes down when the builders show up to town. Like, that shit started a massive Star Wars-esque war between these builders and an alliance of all the major races in the Marvel cosmos, which is an event that I have been dying for the MCU to adapt for years now. But anyways, after the Guardians save Peter from becoming Ego's battery, they head towards the inside of the planet for Ego's core, eventually opting to send Baby Groot with an Anulax battery bomb to help escort Ego to the gates of Celestial Hell to get poked in the ass by Celestial Satan's pitchfork. Because how dare he kill Meredith Quill, she was a sweet woman. Baby Groot then travels down these tiny tunnels to Ego's brainy core, much like the Fantastic Four did in the pages of 1981's Fantastic Four 235. And after the Guardians hold down the fort for a little while, Yondu would eventually use his arrow to slowly and safely bring him down to the surface after his ship explodes, causing Peter to hilariously call him Mary Poppins in reference to how Mary Poppins used to glide down to Earth on her umbrella in the 1964 Mary Poppins film. But after Ego ends up waking up from Mantis' sleep powers, he eventually subdues the Guardians and triggers the expansion of a number of his celestial tumors that he'd placed on planets throughout the universe, including Xandar, Hala, Akon, the planet, not the singer, Arago 7, Isik, and of course, Terra, with James Gunn's own parents, James F. and Leota Gunn, using their phones to take pictures of the cosmic cancer in St. Charles, Missouri. But after Peter Quill channels the love that he has for all of his friends and family, he manages to take control of Ego's light to give Ego a fair fight, with that fight causing Peter to hilariously transform into Pac-Man to gobble up the blue asshole that was his father, much like Pac-Man gobbles up those blue ghosts after he eats that big-ass pill. But their fight quickly ends as soon as Baby Groot, the destroyer of worlds, detonates the Anulax bomb on Ego's brain, giving Ego a taste of his own damn medicine after killing Meredith Quill in a similar fashion. However, with only one holographic spacesuit left, Yondu would end up giving his spacesuit to Peter in order for Peter to survive the implosion of Ego's planet, selflessly sacrificing his own life for his son. Then, during Yondu's funeral, the Guardians would place a number of Yondu's favorite objects around his body, including this blue crystal frog that Yondu stole from the broker in Guardians 1, as well as the troll doll that Peter switched out for the Power Stone at the end of Guardians 1 as well. And because of Yondu's heroic sacrifice, the Ravagers that once abandoned Yondu all end up showing up to give Yondu a proper Ravager funeral, as father and son by Cat Stevens symbolically plays in the background, with all the Ravager clan leaders all belonging to the original Guardians of the Galaxy team from the comics. In addition to Stakar and Martin X, we see Ving Rhames as Charlie 27, and Stakar's on-again, off-again wife Alida O'Gord, played by Michelle Yeoh. And then during one of the post-credit scenes, when Stakar calls for a reunification of the Ravagers following Yondu's funeral, we also see classic Guardians characters Kruger the Sorcerer and Mainframe the Robot, with Mainframe being played by actress Miley Cyrus in this movie before getting replaced with Miss Minutes actress Tara Strong in Guardians 3. And finally, during the actual credits of Guardians 2, we can see Jeff Goldblum as the Grandmaster doing a little dance a few months before his debut in Thor Ragnarok. And even though the Grandmaster himself was not a thing in this movie, him showing up in a film centered around a possible Elder of the Universe is extremely fitting in my opinion. Right at the very beginning, before the Marvel Studios logo starts flashing all the best MCU moments of the Guardians of the Galaxy, we can see the words "Showtime, a-holes" in script text, a direct reference to Star-Lord getting ready to fight the interdimensional Obelisk in Guardians 2, as well as Marvel's incredibly cheeky way of declaring showtime for the film. And this is then followed by Peter's Guardians 2 line about there being an unspoken thing, Drax's Guardians 2 line about there being two types of people in the universe, those who dance and those who do not dance, Adult Groot's "We Are Groot" from Guardians 1, and both of Rocket's Guardians 1 lines of "Jackasses standing in a circle" and "Ain't no thing like me except me." The latter being foreshadowing for the end of the movie when Rocket discovers he was wrong the entire time after he finds a cage of baby raccoons. Because it turns out the High Evolutionary stole a bunch of animals from North America on Terra a long time ago, including a bunch of baby raccoons from the Columbus Wildlife Center, though the first two letters in Columbus appear to have disappeared over time, so it kind of looks like Columbus Wildlife Center. But what I truly love about this part with all these baby raccoons embracing Rocket when he opens their cage is that this moment is a direct contrast to how the movie actually opens up, with the flashback to Rocket's own early days as a baby raccoon being deathly afraid of the coming approach of his abusive, apathetic god, the High Evolutionary, whose predatory hand towers over a fearful baby Rocket like a claw in a claw machine or an animalistic predator in the sky. Every single Guardians of the Galaxy movie has opened up with an important flashback for that movie's main captain of the Guardians. We got flashbacks of Meredith Quill's death and Peter Quill's abduction in Guardians 1, followed by a flashback of Peter's parents in Guardians 2. Now with Rocket ending this Rocket-centric movie as the captain of the Guardians, starting with a Rocket Raccoon flashback this time around was very appropriate. Then after we see Rocket rapidly age up into the Rocket of the modern day, we can hear him listening to an acoustic version of Creep by Radiohead. But what I truly love about this moment is that it appears that Rocket only sings the parts of the song that he can personally relate to. Like when he sings When You Were Here Before, Couldn't Look You in the Eye, You're Just Like an Angel, Your Skin Makes Me Cry. That makes me feel like Rocket is singing about Lila and his old disfigured friends who are now just like angels in the sky. Then Rocket sings, I'm a weirdo and I want to have control, I want a perfect body, obviously pointing to how he feels about his own self, his tragic past, and how he feels like he has no control over his life and his destiny. It's really super sad stuff, but it's also an incredibly clever use of this acoustic cover by James Gunn. But anyways, as Rocket walks around Nowhere, we can see that Nowhere has continued to grow as the Guardian's city-sized haven for any lost alien soul who needs a home in the galaxy, especially since we last saw it in the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. A special where we learned that the Guardians purchased the entirety of this empty celestial noggin from the Collector himself, though I imagine that after Nowhere was destroyed by Thanos 7 or 8 years prior, he was more than eager to be rid of that place and the Guardians forever, because every time the Guardians show up, something bad happens to him. But man, it is really hard to believe that it has been nearly 12 MCU years since we first met the Guardians in 2014. But hey, the progress definitely shows. Their family has grown exponentially, because that city is freaking huge. But anyways, Rocket walks past a Drax who claims that only idiots dance to a dancing mantis. This is not only a reference to his quote to Peter about those who dance and those who do not dance, but is also a tease for the changed person that Drax will become by the end of the film, when he uses his idiotic dancing to bring joy to all of the Star Children. Then when Rocket observes Groot and Nebula hanging up a new Guardians of the Galaxy neon sign written in the galactic language of the Andromeda Galaxy, the man, the myth, the legend, Stephen Blackheart can be seen standing right behind them, returning to his role as Steamy Blue Liver. Because remember that dispatcher dude on Nowhere that Drax threatened with a knife to contact Ronan in Guardians 1? He's back, and this time, he's got a gun! Stephen Blackheart is actually a close personal actor friend of James Gunn, and those two homies have worked together on a bunch of projects like PG Porn, Super, The Belko Experiment, Brightburn, and even Guardians of the Galaxy 2 when he played one of the alien Ravagers. More recently, Steven has played the pilot Briscoe in the Suicide Squad and the savage Charlie the Gorilla in Peacemaker, the greatest TV show of all time. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules, that TV show is just awesome. But anyway, Stephen Blackheart is a fantastic man, and he and I have been social media homies for years now, as he has been a huge help on my hunt for the big missing Guardians of the Galaxy 1 Easter egg. So give Stephen Blackheart a follow at Blackheart on Instagram right now. That is a demand. He's a great man. Go like his pictures. But anyways, Rocket then enters a common eating area to a drunk Star-Lord wearing a shirt with an Orloni on it that says Space Candy. Star-Lord has apparently been getting blackout drunk extremely regularly as his not-so-great way of getting over his loss of Gamora. The fridge that Rocket approaches is apparently a massive fridge filled with milky fizz, as that is the words written on the glass. And don't worry, it's not like carbonated milk or anything. That sounds disgusting and I would throw up right now. Carbonated milk would have definitely killed Rocket before Adam Warlock even got there. This milky fizz drink is apparently supposed to taste like desert pear soda water with cream. And it's something that people have actually tasted in real life at the Pym Test Kitchen at Avengers Campus in California. But anyways, I really dig the chandelier speakers on the ceiling in this eating area because it really shows just how much Peter Quill's love of music has been built into all of Nowhere. Like, there are speakers everywhere so everyone can dance at the end of the movie. I really like how James Gunn sort of symbolically filled Nowhere's celestial head with music, much like Meredith filled Ego's head with music when he was on Earth. It's kind of like history repeating itself in a symbolic way. But anyways, as a disappointed Nebula carries a passed out Peter, we get one of the last James Gunn slow walks of the MCU. Badass slow motion hero walks is one of James Gunn's favorite things in this world, and he's done it in every Guardians movie, as well as his newer DC projects like the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. And also, fun fact about Chris Pratt in this shot, he's not actually in this shot. That's just a disturbingly lifelike Chris Pratt dummy that they made so Karen Gillan could bench the weight of a collapsed Star Lord. But if you just assumed that Karen Gillan was just swole like that, I wouldn't blame you. Karen Gillan's got the guns. But anyways, as Nebula puts Peter to bed, Peter whispers, "I love you, Gamora," while grabbing Nebula's arm, before Radiohead sings the words, "I wish I was special," very much implying to me that Nebula might just be developing some slight romantic feelings towards Peter as she has been trying to take care of him for her dead sister Gamora. Throughout this entire movie, Nebula is extremely protective of Star-Lord while also bickering with him like a married couple, so I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up as the father and mother figures to all the citizens of Nowhere down the line. I mean, Karen Gillan did recently tease Nebula's tiny crush on Star-Lord in an interview, so it definitely feels likely that this was intentional by James Gunn. And Rocket even asked Nebula what she is going to do about Peter's drunk ass because Rocket is too busy dealing with his own emotionalistical issues. And Nebula seems to be the most concerned for Peter out of all of the whole Guardians family. But also, Rocket even acknowledging that he has emotional issues in the first place is definitely a shout out to Rocket's growth in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 when he learns that he doesn't have to be a jerk that pushes people away despite his trauma. But anyways, while those two talk, we of course get a sneak preview of the handy-dandy gravity boots that Rocket will end up using to escape the High Evolutionary's clutches at the end of the film. But then we are finally introduced to the true star of the movie, Cosmo the Space Dog, as played by actress Maria Bakalova. During a card game with her former collector jailmate, Howard the Duck, we learn in this movie that Cosmo is a little over 60 freaking years old, and she was sent away on a rocket on a suicide science mission from Russia in 1966. And the 60s are, coincidentally, the era that Doctor Strange hints that the Fantastic Four were popular in Multiverse of Madness. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Soviets were interested in that same weird cosmic energy readings in space that the Fantastic Four were in their origin story. But instead of sending humans into space like America did with the Fantastic Four, the Russians sent Cosmo into space to go check out those readings, and then Cosmo got superpowers. But anyways, after Cosmo shows Kraglin up with her cool telekinesis powers by hitting targets engraved with the love bots of Contraxia from Guardians 2, we learn that there is a distinct difference between how Cosmo and Kraglin use their similar looking powers. When Kraglin declares Cosmo a bad dog because telekinesis is cheating. While Cosmo's powers are telekinetic in nature, Kraglin's use of Yondu's fin and arrow are not rooted in the mind, but the emotions of the heart, which is why the Yondu of Christmas Past shows up briefly towards the end of the film to remind Kraglin how to fly the arrow. He has to use his heart. It's sort of like a pathokinetic telekinesis in a way. It's very reliant on emotions. But anyways, as the Guardians try to figure out what to do with Peter's depression while eating some fried orloni, Rocket suggests that Mantis use her powers to touch him to make him happy. But Groot, of course, takes it in the sexual way because Groot is a teenager who was raised by the inappropriate Star-Lord. And while this is a hilarious joke, this could also be a slight nod to Mantis's short time as a prostitute in the comics, meant to showcase just how different this MCU version of Mantis is to these very outdated comics. But anyways, as Rocket gets prepared to go to sleep for a lot longer than he intended, we can see the same High Evolutionary surgery scars on Rocket's back that we got a glimpse of when we first went to the Kyln Prison in Guardians 1. These back scars are a big reason why director James Gunn wanted to return to Marvel to finish the Guardians trilogy, because he always intended to tell Rocket's tragic backstory from the very beginning, because Rocket Raccoon has always been James Gunn's secret main protagonist of the trilogy, which is something that Lila's spirit hints at to Rocket later on in the film when she says the line, "The story has always been yours, you just didn't know it." Then, as Crazy on You by Heart plays, we finally get the debut of Adam Warlock to the MCU after the Guardians 2 post-credit scene had Aisha first begin his birthing process 11 to 12 years prior to the events of Guardians 3. Sporting his comic-accurate red and yellow colors and skull on the chest, Adam Warlock glows with a golden fire very similar to Captain Marvel's. However, it looks like James Gunn decided to use a raccoon skull this time around, which I thought was a nice touch given Aisha and the Sovereign's disdain for Rocket's theft of their batteries in Guardians 2. And though Adam does appear to have a stone on his forehead like he does in the comics, this stone's purpose has yet to be revealed in the MCU, so we don't really know why that's there. But if I were to guess, I would assume that there was probably a tube or something attached to his forehead that was basically acting like an umbilical cord, feeding him all of the energy into his body that he needed to become the ultimate, highly evolved, sovereign creature. And it also appears that Adam Warlock knew Rocket Raccoon's exact location before he even left the Sovereign Planet to go get him, likely using the High Evolutionary's kill switch locked around Rocket's internal organs to find him. And then as Adam faces off with Nebula, we can see Nebula's new and improved nanotech arm in action, an arm that she reveals later on was made for her by Rocket Raccoon himself, likely as a thank you for her gifting him Bucky's vibranium arm in the holiday special. Like, this arm definitely feels like Rocket was inspired heavily by Tony Stark and the Wakandan nanotechnology during his time on Earth with the Avengers. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Rocket repurposed Bucky's arm to make this new arm for Nebula. But anyways, the very flexible nanotech nature of Nebula's arm allows Nebula to transform it into a Mega Man-like arm cannon, a sword like Razor Fist from Shang-Chi, an electroshock cannon, a laser cutter, and even a weird suction arm. Like Lila said, it's always good to have friends, especially friends who can make your arm turn into a weapon. But anyways, at the end of Adam and Groot's anime-style fight through the air, Adam destroys all of Groot's body except for Groot's head, which he mercifully drops to the ground instead of destroying it, both pointing to Adam's very kind nature underneath his douchey personality and confirming that the only thing that the Groot species needs to survive are their heads. And then when Nebula uses her superheated sword arm to stab Adam through the chest, Will Poulter's excellent delivery of "that hurts" was perfect, because that was very likely the first time this godlike being had ever experienced true pain. But Nebula could not give a singular damn, because all she knows in her life is pain, as she was the daughter of the very abusive Thanos. But anyways, as Rocket lies on the floor unconscious, we get a series of flashbacks to Rocket Raccoon's creation at Arete Laboratories on Counter-Earth, or Half-World. And in these flashbacks, we can see the letters 89P13 being tattooed onto Rocket's skin, with the prefix 89 referring to the High Evolutionary's Batch 89, which of course are Rocket's soon-to-be slain friends. Floor, who is 89L06, Teefs the Walrus, who is 89A95, and Lila, who is 89Q12. Batch 89 appears to be heavily inspired by the Rocket Raccoon comics, as the comic book Rocket Raccoon goes on adventures with Lila, Walrus, and a rabbit named Blackjack O'Hare. Rocket Raccoon's bestie, Walrus, was even teased in a Lovebot motel on Contraxia in Guardians 2. James Gunn literally had an artist recreate the second panel on page 3 of 1985's Rocket Raccoon #2, possibly as a tease for Teefs in Guardians 3. And when the four caged friends all named themselves later on in the film, we finally learned why Rocket calls himself Rocket. It's after the dream he's always had of building a rocket to fly into the blue sky with all of his friends forever, which definitely makes the Guardians 2 moment of Rocket saying that he was cybernetically engineered to pilot a spacecraft hit a lot different in retrospect. Also, the inclusion of Mr. Blue Sky by the Electric Light Orchestra playing at the start of Guardians 2 as well. But anyway, speaking of the Rocket Raccoon comics, the Guardians then head to Orgo Corp's Orgoscope after Nebula connects to Rocket's vital data and learns of the existence of the High Evolutionary's kill switch passkey. The outer design of the Orgoscope feels heavily inspired by the Space Wheel from the early Rocket Raccoon comics. In the comics, Space Wheel was the headquarters of Rocket Raccoon's main adversary, Lord Divine, who ran a company called Divinities Incorporated, a company that made toys and killer clown robots. But in the MCU, Orgo Corp's Orgoscope is the bioformed science headquarters of Rocket Raccoon's main adversary, the High Evolutionary, with bioformed meaning that the High Evolutionary grew the entire station out of living organic matter, which is why the whole station has a bunch of eyeballs and whatnot. Organic matter that I highly suspect to have come from the Collector's farming of Nowhere's biology for hundreds of years. I mean, both the Collector and the High Evolutionary are both super long-lived people after all, so I can definitely see them being in business for a very long time. But instead of making toys like Space Wheel did in the comics, OrgoCorp has been providing cybernetic implants and genetic upgrades for anyone who will buy them for over 300 years. Mostly so the High Evolutionary can use all that money to fund all of his super messed up experiments throughout the universe. And OrgoCorp is also known for having the most advanced cybernetic IP in the galaxy, including all the patents to every species the High Evolutionary has ever created himself, including the Animan, the Zeronians, the Sovereign, the Hellspawn, the Recorders, the Humanimals of Counter-Earth, and of course, all the failed experiments in between like Subject 89P13 of Batch 89. I kind of feel like Orgo Corp's species patent room has a lot of similarities to the celestial world Forge from Eternals. Because like the celestial god Arishem stores all the memories of his experiments in a massive library of neurons, the High Evolutionary sort of does the same thing by storing crucial memories within the neurons of these tiny pink brain balls that cyborgs like Nebula or the High Evolutionary's recorders can access with their computer brains. Anyways, in order to even get inside of Orgo Corp, Peter and Nebula have to work together to bypass Orgo Corp's invisible 3-layered shielding, another element seemingly inspired by the early Rocket Raccoon comics, as Comic Rocket's home of Half-World had a giant Galatian wall surrounding the Keystone Quadrant that one needed to bypass to even get to the planet. But when the Guardians finally get past those Orgo Corp shields, they run into the United Ravagers, Yondu Udanta's old crew of Ravagers who all put aside their differences and reunited after Yondu's funeral. Though in Guardians 3, it seems that only Sylvester Stallone's Stakar, Michael Rosenbaum's Martin X, Kruger, and Mainframe are still together after all these years, with the voice actor for Miss Minutes, Tara Strong, pulling double MCU duty as Mainframe to fill in for Miley Cyrus this time around. Vin Rhames' Charlie 27 and Michelle Yeoh's Ilida O'Gord are noticeably absent. But picking up their slack is of course the newest member of the United Ravagers, Gamora 2 Multiverse Boogaloo, the Gamora from the alternate 2014 that Thanos emerged from in Avengers Endgame. This Gamora is noticeably different from the Gamora that we've known from the past 2 Guardians films because she lacks the valuable lessons in love and family that the original Gamora learned in those movies. This Gamora is purely the recently freed daughter of Thanos, who is living up to her reputation as the most dangerous woman in the galaxy. It is because of these lack of experiences that Gamora eventually snaps at Peter for trying to make her the lover that she never was by delivering one of the most important lines in the Guardians trilogy, in my opinion.
What are you so afraid of in yourself that I need to be something for you?
This line is super important because it touches on an important theme in Guardians 3, confronting one's fears. Both Rocket and Star-Lord started the Guardians trilogy running from their past parental traumas, but Star-Lord in particular had been using Gamora to fill the Meredith Quill-sized hole in his heart, instead of taking his ass back to Missouri and seeing the grandfather that he left behind. This new variant Gamora saw that desperation within Peter and called him out on it almost immediately after he kept pestering her about not being the dead Gamora. And good for her, quite honestly, because Peter really needed to hear that, much like he needed to hear Mantis and Drax's metaphor on how life is a pond and how Peter tends to hop from woman to woman like lily pads instead of learning how to swim, which is extremely reflected of the sea metaphor that Ego uses in Guardians 2 with Meredith Quill when he refers to Meredith as his river lily in the sea of his expansion. And while Ego and Peter were very different people at the end of the day, the one flaw that they have in common was spending their entire lives attaching to the love of random women for their own selfish reasons. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Later on in the movie, while Gamora is listening to Alice Cooper's I'm Always Chasing Rainbows, trying to figure out exactly why Peter is always pathetically chasing her, she does the totally cool thing and looks through Peter's old backpack that he's had when he was kidnapped by Yondu at 8 years old. A backpack with a NASA and Earth patch to showcase Peter's love for astronomy, a monkey, shark, and palm tree patch to show Peter's love of nature, and 5 Pac-Man ghosts to show Peter's love of arcade games like Pac-Man. I mean, Peter loves Pac-Man so much that he literally turned into Pac-Man while fighting Ego in Guardians 2. Though it is odd that Peter would have 5 Pac-Man ghosts instead of the classic 4, considering that Kinky, the yellow Pac-Man ghost, wasn't introduced until 1996 Pac-Man arrangement, and Peter left Earth in 1988. However, since Pac-Man is always chasing these rainbow ghosts, they all definitely fit in with the theme of the song that is playing in this moment. Also, I don't know why they decided to name the yellow ghost Kinky. Like, why would you do that? Like, really? Was there no board meeting about that? But anyways, inside of Peter's backpack, Gamora pulls out some Alf and Garbage Pail Kids trading cards, the Garfield books, Garfield Eats His Heart Out, and Garfield Takes the Cake, as well as a He-Man toy. Star-Lord's love for He-Man shows extra hard later on in the film when he calls the High Evolutionary a stretched face, Robocop-looking Skeletor wannabe, purple nurple piece of shit. Much like I call anyone who cuts me off in Boston traffic. But most notably, we can see Peter's old report card from St. Charles Elementary in Missouri, where we can see that Peter was getting C's in reading and social studies, D's in science and math, but a solid B in PE, with PE being the only class that he gets a favorable comment from a teacher, with the rest complaining of Peter's laziness in math, disruptive nature during reading, inappropriate comments during science, and talkative nature during social studies. This is all very much in line with Star-Lord's personality now, as he very much excels at physical feats more than anything else. But anyways, when Stakar pulls up with the United Ravagers, I love how the light from his suit makes it look like he has wings, because those light wings plus his blue and gold helmet definitely helps Stakar feel a lot like the Starhawk from the Marvel Comics. But anyways, after the Guardians grab their disguises from Stakar and begin their Orgo Corp infiltration, they run into a number of James Gunn's favorite actors to work with, including Nathan Fillion as Orgo Sentry Captain Karja, who is actually returning to the Guardians trilogy after playing a monstrous inmate in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, Jennifer Holland as the Orgoscope Administrator Qual, and Daniela Melchior, who plays the Krylorian that Peter flirts with named Ura. All three of these actors have roles in James Gunn's DC Universe as the Detachable Kid, Harcourt, and Ratcatcher 2, respectively, though Nathan Fillion has recently been announced as Guy Gardner in James Gunn's new DCU, and honestly, that is probably the most baller casting I've heard in a long-ass time. Like, not even gonna lie, Nathan Fillion was born for that role. That is like RDJ levels of perfect casting. But moving on, as Gamora starts telling the Guardians what to do as they move throughout the Orgoscope, Gamora calls Mantis Bug, which is of course a comment on Mantis's antennas, but also a clever nod to one of the original members of Star-Lord's Guardians of the Galaxy team in the comics, Bug, who Marvel Studios could not use at all in their universe due to Bug being owned by Hasbro as part of the Micronauts property. But anyways, as the Guardians continue to move through Orgocorp and eventually escape by lifting all the Orgo sentries off the ground, much like Rocket did with the Kyln Prison guards in Guardians 1, we get another flashback of Rocket and the High Evolutionary as they listen to the High Evolutionary's favorite 5,000-year-old song, More Auguste Fon, More Egalone Fornote, featuring Ice Spice. If I just accidentally summoned a demon into your bedroom, I formally apologize. Latin is not my first language. A title that translates to, be not as you are, but as you should be, which perfectly encapsulates the High Evolutionary's main mission of turning all the imperfect elements in the universe into one perfect symphony of science, which is why he refers to Rocket as a medley of mistakes later on in the film. To the High Evolutionary, he's not just making monsters, he's making music. And music is a big theme throughout the entire Guardians trilogy, so having an evil music man is very fitting. But when the High Evolutionary brings Rocket Raccoon to assess the aggression problem inside of his enraged mutant danger turtles that he made, Rocket points out that the problem was an overproduction of something called the Liga Beta Microsemeno protein, which is a real protein closely linked to aggression in animals like squids, as noted in a study conducted in 2011. This is when the High Evolutionary completely loses his fucking shit completely at the mere thought of one of his lowly experiments crafting an ingenious thought that he could not come up with himself. I really love how Chukwudi Iwuji crawls on the ground like a predatory animal as he approaches Rocket's cage, and again later on as he slowly approaches Rocket to berate him. Him crawling on the ground like an animal while Rocket stood upright was an excellent piece of imagery to show which one of them was truly the most evolved on the inside. But anyways, after the Guardians learned that Recorder Thiel, one of the High Evolutionary's most sadistic cyborgs responsible for Rocket's torturous past, who Peter bumped into during the Orgocorp infiltration, downloaded and deleted the passkey before the Guardians got to it first, the Guardians resolved to head to Counter-Earth despite Gamora selfishly warning them not to. And much like Drax did with Ronan in the first film, Gamora ends up making a selfish phone call that ends up alerting Aisha and Adam to the Guardians' location. And as the Guardians fly over the surface of Counter-Earth, Peter discovers that it is a near-perfect recreation of planet Earth circa the 1980s, the same era that Peter left his planet Earth. And according to the film and director James Gunn on Twitter, the High Evolutionary visited Counter-Earth one time in the 1980s and was so impressed with Earth's culture that he decided to base the entirety of Counter-Earth on his loose memories of that visit, which is why we can see a version of the Statue of Liberty remade to include the High Evolutionary and a monkey, and why all the people, architecture, cars, and home decor all look super retro. I really hope there was a Night Monkey No Way Home scenario that happened at that Statue of Liberty, because that would have been hilarious. But since we do know that the High Evolutionary did visit the Earth in the 1980s, I am curious about whether or not he teamed up with Advanced Idea Mechanics or any type of Earth genius during his visit, because if you remember in Iron Man 3, Aldrich Killian had an entire map of the universe at his disposal, a map that he shows Pepper very briefly. That map could have easily been gifted to AIM by the High Evolutionary in the 1980s before AIM was even made into a company. He probably found a group of geniuses who was like, hey, you guys are unethical like me, here's a map to the universe, sky's the limit. But anyways, as the Guardians land on Counter-Earth, you can see a little baby warthog watching the ship descend while holding a little high evolutionary plushie, blissfully unaware that they're about to die at the hands of the very plushie that they're holding. And I really love how James Gunn had that rabbit man yell "Nanu Nanu" at the Guardians after Drax absolutely eliminates a little girl with a ball, as it is a clear reference to Robin Williams' famous catchphrase as the alien Mork in 1978's Mork and Mindy. And then when the people of Counter-Earth start throwing rocks at the Guardians, Nebula tells Groot to go full kaiju mode, which is a direct reference to Groot's first ever Marvel appearance as a massive kaiju monster in the pages of 1960's Tales to Astonish number 13, and a tease to the massive person that Groot becomes at the very end of the film. Then after the Guardians make themselves a little bit too comfortable in Neely the Vampire Bat's Humanimal's home, Peter draws Neely his beautiful rendition of what Recorder Theo looks like. Now, listen to what Neely says in reaction to seeing Recorder Theo's face.
Motio.
His name is Motio?
Ew.
Neely says Mojo and then shakes her head when Peter pronounces it as Mochio. I believe this is super important because I believe this is Recorder Theo's true purpose in Guardians 3. I believe that James Gunn is using Recorder Theo and a bunch of elements in Guardians 3 to set up the origin of Mojo in the MCU. Now hear me out here, because it's not just some bat lady saying a name that points to a possible Mojo origin in Guardians 3. The cyborg Recorder Theo's deeply sadistic personality towards Rocket and all of the High Evolutionaries' mutated animals and Star Children appears to very much mirror the very deep love and fascination with torturing mutants that the super fleshy and disgusting spineless cyborg Mojo has in the comics. And when you consider just how much alike the High Evolutionaries' controller pilot of the Ariete Laboratories looks oddly similar to the Mojo design in the comics, it definitely feels likely to me that we could see Recorder Theo's cyborg data re-downloaded and his body reconstituted at OrgoCorp, using some of that OrgoCorp flesh to make his new fleshy, spineless body, before adopting the very name that all the Humanimals call him as his own, Mojo. But that's just a theory. A Mojo theory. But anyway, speaking of Theo and the Star Children, Phyla can be seen defying gravity as she runs in front of the High Evolutionary on a high-tech hamster wheel, as the High Evolutionary tells Recorder Theo that his mutated Star Children have the ability to survive extremely happily on 30 calories a day and an hour of sleep a week, and yet still be able to rewrite a Carbonatrix core in under 2 hours without getting hangry. So Phyla and the rest of her mutated friends are as super smart as they appear to be powerful. And it's also very fitting that Phyla is a Star Child, considering that she will ultimately become the hero Quasar in the MCU, much like she is in the comics. But anyways, when the Guardians finally arrive at Arete Laboratories, with Arete of course being the Greek word for excellence and self-actualization, they're greeted by two of the most badass looking characters in all of MCU history, Behemoth, played by Ronaldo Fabrel, and my personal favorite, Warpig, as played by actress Judy Greer, who of course has also played Maggie Lang in the Ant-Man films. Like, I am beyond upset that Warpig was killed off in this movie. Marvel, if you're listening, just put Warpig's head back on her body and then put her on the new Guardians team. She is way too badass looking to stay dead, in my opinion. Like, come on. I know she's probably fried bacon on the surface of the planet, but, you know, you can just retcon that. It's just fine. And when the High Evolutionary finally faces off against Peter and Groot, he tells them of his plans to destroy Counter-Earth like he's done many times before on other planets that he's created, very much like his comic book counterpart did to Counter-Earth in 2015's Uncanny Avengers #2 by Rick Remender, thus deepening the High Evolutionary similarities to the MCU Celestial Arishem the Judge, who has threatened to bring the same type of destruction to Earth if the Eternals' memories show him things that he does not like. However, when the High Evolutionary actually initiates the destruction of Counter-Earth and Adam Warlock flies to save Aisha, a detail about this moment that is very easy to overlook is that Aisha did not choose to leave her spaceship without her son Adam. Though Aisha was literally one of the douchiest people to ever exist in the universe, who repeatedly wanted to kill Adam's adorable new pet Fasaki Blurp throughout the movie, we do get a deep sense that she truly cared for both her science experiment of a son and her people. Like, she wasn't a completely heartless being. She was just an asshole. But speaking of Blurp, this isn't the first time the Fasaki race has appeared in the MCU, as a hairless Fasaki can be seen eating a bunch of Orloni at a bar in Nowhere as the Guardians wait for the Collector. And also, fun fact about Nowhere in Guardians 3, the coordinates to Nowhere are actually different from the coordinates that we get in Guardians 1. This is of course because of the mobile nature of the Nowhere installation, thanks to the upgrades that Peter and the Guardians have installed on this giant celestial head. It can move now. But moving on, after Peter pushes Recorder Thiel off of the Arete Labs and Groot starts growing his tree wings, we can actually hilariously see Peter and Groot falling behind Nebula, Mantis, and Drax as they all desperately tried to enter Arete Laboratories to save Peter and Groot. It really is quite the hilarious blink and you'll miss it visual gag. But anyways, once Peter and Groot finally make it back onto their ship to a rocket at death's door, we can see what appears to be the MCU's latest depiction of the afterlife, after first being introduced to the concept in Black Panther and then having the afterlife concept further explained to us as untethered consciousness by Taweret in Moon Knight. Because in the MCU, it appears that one's afterlife is highly dependent on what that person personally believes heaven to be. Wakandans believe in the ancestral plane, so all the Wakandans go there when they die. The Kree believe in the supreme intelligence, so all the Kree join the collective supreme intelligence consciousness when they die. Mark Spector believed in Egyptian mythology due to his connection with Khonshu, so his afterlife was the Field of Reeds. Rocket's afterlife is a similar situation in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, because heaven to the tortured prisoners like Rocket, Lila, Floor, and Teefs very much looks like a bunch of open cages within a bright and infinite white sky, because that is literally what all four of them dreamed of all the time, being free in the open sky. But what is super special about this particular afterlife case is that Rocket Raccoon had a choice whether or not to keep on living, because after Lila says that Rocket can join her, Floor, and Teefs in the afterlife, Rocket breathes out a sigh of relief because he can finally leave that meaningless universe behind. And it is that sigh of relief that directly leads to his flatlining in the film. And as soon as Rocket flatlines, Peter screams at his side much like he did as a kid while watching his mother Meredith die, and also like he did with Yondu in Guardians 2 when he died. However, it is Lila herself who proves to be the movie's greatest hero, as her words to Rocket about what gives life meaning is what sends his untethered consciousness falling down from the sky and back into his body.
There are the hands that made us, and then there are the hands that guide the hands.
And that is when Lila became one of my favorite MCU characters of all time. Like, what an incredibly selfless and loving soul she was, even in death. She missed Rocket, but still let him go. That takes a lot of strength. But anyways, once Mantis, Drax, and Nebula finally make their way inside of the Arete, they run into the holding cells for all of the High Evolutionaries' Star Children. Cells that appear to include drinking tubes filled with the same mysterious yellow liquid that the High Evolutionary appears to have injected Rocket with at the start of the film to trigger Rocket's evolutionary growth. This liquid is probably what has helped the Star Children evolve into the super powerful beings that Phyla appears to be at the end of the movie. I have a feeling that this yellow liquid could potentially be linked to the same yellow evolutionary power found in the Sovereign's Anulax batteries, or Harbillary batteries if you speak French, which is why Rocket knew that the Sovereign batteries could cause a chain reaction throughout Ego's nervous system in Guardians 2. This is honestly why I believe that the Guardians 3 logo is yellow this time around, because Guardians 3 is all about the concept of evolution, and it's the same reason why the Eternals logo is golden yellow as well, because much like that yellow MCU energy caused Rocket and Phyla's mutations in Guardians 3, yellow MCU energy also helped the Deviant Crow evolve after he shoved a swirly straw inside of both Ajak and Gilgamesh and drank the yellow solar energy inside of their bodies that they all got inside of their bodies after sitting in front of Earth's yellow star for so long at the beginning of the movie. This could be why the High Evolutionary calls his children his Star Children, because of the star energy inside of this yellow juice. Not just because that they were his star pupils, but also because he used the evolving radiation energy from yellow celestial suns to make his evolution juice. So much like the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 logo was blue and red to denote the blue and red energies of Ego's planet, the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 logo is golden yellow to denote the concept of evolution. That's just a theory. But anyways, when Star-Lord calls Kraglin and Steamy to bring Nowhere to the Arete, we can see Kraglin playing cards with both Seth Green's Howard the Duck and the Broker from Guardians 1, played by Christopher Fairbanks. But what my favorite part about Nowhere rescuing all the people and animals of the Arete is that Nowhere is actually fulfilling the purpose that the Collector originally had it for. Because we learn in a Guardians 1 interview from Benicio del Toro that the Collector's collection on Nowhere was meant to be a Noah's Ark type of act of altruism, because the Collector foresaw a coming catastrophe in the universe that was going to jeopardize all life. So he started collecting a bunch of living beings like Noah did in the Bible in order to save them. That's a real creepy way of going about things, Tanalier, but hey, everyone needs a hobby. Then of course we get the return of the interdimensional Aboleth creatures from Guardians 2, who regularly emerge from the cracks in reality around Sovereign to feed on the yellow evolution Anulax energy irradiating from their planet. Like, one of my favorite parts about Mantis' personality is her immense kindness and empathy, and I truly love how Mantis uses her kindness and empathy to calm these ableist creatures down, because it perfectly exemplifies what makes Mantis so unique. Mantis is a truly selfless being who cares so much about defending others. Like when Rocket got hurt, she attended to Rocket even though her own arm was broken, she yells at Nebula for pushing Drax, and she spends the entire movie trying to heal the hole in Peter's heart by pushing Peter to return to Earth. If anyone is the truest guardian of the galaxy, it is Mantis in my opinion, because Mantis has an extremely protective heart that has always known that all life has meaning. And that is what it truly means to be a guardian of the galaxy. And that's why Rocket chose to spare the High Evolutionary's life in the end, and why Groot told Adam that everyone deserves a second chance. Because the Guardians of the Galaxy would not exist if they weren't all given a second chance to be better people. Those merciful words to Adam Warlock would affect Adam Warlock greatly, and then cause him to start to become the merciful Adam Warlock that we know from the comics. James Gunn having Peter and Adam recreate Michelangelo's creation of Adam, while Adam saves Peter, was such a nice touch because of this. But anyways, when Rocket and the High Evolutionary finally face off, the High Evolutionary shoves Rocket against the wall with his favorite anti-gravity powers that appear to be rooted within his suit. A suit that behaves very similarly to Kang's suit in Quantumania, especially when Kang used that suit to torture Cassie and Scott. But when the Guardians overpower the High Evolutionary and take off his face, I don't think that this was just meant to expose the true monster underneath the High Evolutionary, but I also believe that this was Marvel's way of setting up the origin of the High Evolutionary's iconic purple mask that he always wears in the comics for later films, because it doesn't look like his skin mask is going to stick on his face if you look at it in the deleted scene. But anyways, as the Guardians escape the Arete with all the freed prisoners, Mantis opens a cage for a tiny abomination that scares her. This monstrous creature is actually played and voiced by director James Gunn. If you haven't seen the raw footage of this moment, I highly recommend that you do, because it is hilarious, and James Gunn's squat walking is just straight comedy. Both the Gunn brothers have amazing knees. And while Peter heads to deactivate the shield so everyone can make it across to nowhere, he runs into a bug-eyed alien with a gun. This alien is named Flectic, and he is played by Mr. Steal Your Girl himself, Pete Davidson, who of course worked with James Gunn in the past on the Suicide Squad as the short-lived Blackguard. But anyways, as the movie wraps up, Peter's journey throughout the movie leads him to finally decide to stop running from his fears and announce his return to Earth, which then inspires Mantis to face her own fear of going off on her own for the first time ever since Ego and the Guardians, which then forces Drax to confront his own fear of losing another daughter figure in his life after Ronan killed his daughter before Guardians 1. He wanted so badly to protect Mantis, but he was forced to let her go do her own thing, just like Peter had to face his fear of letting Gamora go. And Nebula herself faced her fear of vulnerability when she admits that she needs Drax with her to be a father figure for Nowhere, after she spent the entire movie being a crabby blueberry who rejects help from almost everyone. Like, all the Guardians of the Galaxy grow so much during this film. I freaking love it. And of course, the biggest surprise of this movie is when Groot says, "I love you guys" to all of his friends. Though a lot of people assume that this was Groot finally learning to say words beyond "I am Groot," this is actually not the case. Groot is actually saying "I am Groot" in this moment, but James Gunn purposely made us understand Groot because we have spent so much time with Groot since 2014. So much like Gamora began to understand Groot at the end of the film, the audience has begun to understand him as well. But anyways, when Peter finally arrives back on Earth and enters his grandfather's house in Missouri, we can see all of Meredith Quill's music records and memories against this wall. But right next to a picture of her and Peter, we can see a framed image that says, "Everything grows with love." I believe this is a clear reference to Ego the Living Planet and how Ego used Meredith's love to grow all of his evil tumor plants, as we can see when Meredith and Ego kiss at the beginning of Guardians 2. It is love that fueled Ego's expansion, and he needed Peter's heart to do that. And finally, much like in Guardians 2, Guardians 3 ends with a shot of Rocket, because much like Lila says in the movie, the story has been Rocket's all along. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this breakdown of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and I want to thank Paul once again for his super generous and kind soul for giving me the opportunity to do this amazing breakdown on his amazing channel. Guardians of the Galaxy has meant a lot to me as a human being, and it's taught me a lot of lessons about the importance of human connection and love. So getting to do this breakdown has been an absolute dream come true. You rock, Paul. I love you so much. You're the best. And yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching this ultimate breakdown for the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. You guys are amazing for spending multiple hours with me. This is a very long video. And like always, you guys can follow me at Mastertainment on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, wherever I am on the internet. But most importantly, follow Heavy Spoilers by subscribing and hitting that like button, and maybe even hitting up the Heavy Spoiler store to pick up some merch. But yes, I cannot thank you guys enough for watching this video. You guys are amazing. I'll catch you guys later. Bye.